particular child is moving into another family. That can stir up a lot of angst for the parent, for that generation. And things get said and things get seen, slights get perceived, and before you know it, you've got a full-blown crisis. But there have been stories around who gets to go for a hen party, for example. And I think it's very unusual to have an intergenerational hen party. Who wants to have their mother... You know, hen parties...
My mum wasn't at my hen party. She wouldn't want to be.
The thing is, they get quite
drunk.
They get quite lewd. And would you want your future mother-in-law to watch you play some variant of pinning the appendage on whatever? So I think there are reasons why you don't invite everybody, but then who gets the territory? I think if you can be much more magnanimous and accept that it isn't about losing a child but gaining a family, then you can have a very different mindset.
It's interesting, though, because just by raising all of that, there's a lot of focus on saying, well, Adam Peaty has uninvited his mother. But this, whatever the tension, it must be from both sides, presumably.
Yeah. That's right. And nobody will really know what it's about because they themselves will probably not know what it's about. And it may actually be about things historically that are now being brought up into the surface. But we see it at Christmas as well. In the run-up to Christmas, there will be tensions about who gets to go where on the day.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
A really important thing about GB News, and it's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid. That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debates and analysis all the way through, as usual, until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's blockbuster of a show. With only 48 hours until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget. Taxpayers, businesses, pensioners, farmers, publicans, they're all bracing themselves for pain. Who will be the winners and who will be the losers? What will it mean for you? GB News will give you unparalleled, no-nonsense insights all the way until D-Day. And the Tory party chairman is facing a blitzkrieg of criticism after he compared a gold Reform logo to the Nazis' golden party badge. On today's show, I'll be joined by Reform's Alan Mendoza, who asks, is Kevin Hollenrake out of his mind? Well, GB News earlier on spoke to Kemi Badenoch on the matter.
I'm not going to apologise for a tweet that was made in jest. There's far too much time spent on silly things like tweets at a time when we've got a budget on Wednesday.
And meanwhile, BBC top brass will today face a grilling in Parliament, with huge questions about anti-Trump, anti-Israel bias and pro-trans bias. BBC chairman Samir Shah will awkwardly face the music with Panorama whistleblower Michael Prescott. Can the BBC survive this latest scandal? GB News will be there for you exclusively live. And a fashion designer... And a fashion designer has been accused of ramming woke politics down our throats by releasing a designer clothing range made of wool, wait for it, from gay sheep. On today's show, I ask a sheep farmer, can a sheep really be gay? Or is this just another bad joke? I absolutely love my job. We've got light, we've got shade, we've got the budget that is scaring people behind the sofas. We've got gay sheep. We've got Kemi Badenoch doubling down on these astonishing accusations from the Tory party chair that the Reform Party are like the Nazi Party. There are two rules about mentioning Nazis or Hitler in politics. First rule, don't mention them. Second rule, if you're still tempted, see Rule 1. It's mindless. Don't go there. Nigel Farage being gifted another PR win. Talking of which, the Reform leader expected in Wales, around about 20 to 5, will be there for that for you, as well as that lashing the BBC expected to take in Parliament. In around about half an hour's time, we'll have a front row seat as the BBC gets its grilling. Get in touch, GBNews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Just after 3 o'clock, well, Downing Street say the Chancellor will take tough but right decisions in her budget on Wednesday this week, keeping inflation down and safeguarding public services. The pledge comes as the UK's largest business group warned the government must change course and make hard choices. CBI boss Ray Newton-Smith says Rachel Reeves must avoid death by 1,000 taxes that he says could risk the UK getting locked in a stop-start economy. Number 10 have also added this lunchtime that the welfare system is, they say, not fair or sustainable, and that the Chancellor is now driving reform to change it. Reports suggest that Rachel Reeves will unveil £15 billion of extra benefits spending on Wednesday and scrap the two-child benefit cap. Well, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch took aim at Labour's employment rights bill today. She says Britain needs more people in work.
My first job was on the high street. I started at McDonald's and then I got a job in New Look, part-time. Those were the places that gave me a chance to learn. Many of you in this room probably had your first job during a summer holiday or on a Christmas shift. These opportunities are at a real risk of disappearing because of this legislation. This is not industrial relations, this is industrial intimidation.
Senior staff members at the BBC will face questions from MPs later this afternoon on the corporation's editorial standards. BBC Chairman Samir Shah, board member Sir Robbie Gibb and former editorial advisor Michael Prescott will all face the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. They wrote to the BBC after a report by Mr Prescott raised concerns that a Panorama episode edited a speech made by President Donald Trump before the Capitol riots in 2021. Mr Shah apologised on behalf of the broadcaster over an error of judgment in that edit following the resignation of the Director General Tim Davie and News Chief Deborah Turnus. President Trump has since said that he will sue the corporation, while US regulator the Federal Communications Commission has also launched an investigation. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed what he called the significant progress made at meetings between the US and Ukraine in Geneva. The UK is set to host a video call of the so-called Coalition of the Willing tomorrow. President Donald Trump has also said that something good just may be happening after a weekend of talks on a US peace plan, while the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will continue to work with partners on compromises to the deal in order to strengthen and not weaken his country. Sir Keir Starmer says Ukraine needs a just and a lasting peace.
It's got to be just, and obviously matters for Ukraine have to be determined by Ukraine. But it's also got to be lasting. It's got to endure. So that's the focus. There's more work to do. As you know, along with President Macron, I've been leading the Coalition of the Willing, which is a group of countries that have put in place support for Ukraine, particularly capability. And I'm now planning that we will meet virtually tomorrow. So we will host a Coalition of the Willing call to further discuss the progress that is being made and I hope can be made.
The former Prime Minister, Lord Cameron, has revealed that he has been treated for prostate cancer. David Cameron said he was urged to get a PSA test by his wife, Samantha, and was later diagnosed after an MRI scan and a biopsy. After being successfully treated, the former Prime Minister says he now wants to use his position to call for screenings to be offered to high-risk men. The Princess of Wales has called for the stigma faced by those with addictions to end and for society to show compassion and love to those dependent on drugs, on alcohol or gambling. In a message to mark Addiction Awareness Week, the Princess says that society's experience of addiction is shaped by fear and shame and judgment, urging people to have an open conversation and bring the issue out of the shadows. Princess Catherine is patron of the Forward Trust, a charity supporting recovering addicts that's behind the week-long campaign. And we've heard today that Jimmy Cliff, the Jamaican reggae singer and actor, has died at the age of 81. In a statement, his wife Latifah Chambers wrote, "It is with profound sadness that I share that my husband, Jimmy Cliff, has crossed over due to a seizure followed by pneumonia." The two-time Grammy-winning artist Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. Those are the headlines for now. I'll be back with you shortly. Next, though, let's take a look at the markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews Financial Report.
8 minutes past 3 here are the markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.3104 and €1.1354 euros. The price of gold is £3,112, 12 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 9,547 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now, the countdown is on because there's less than 48 hours now until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget. Taxpayers, businesses, pensioners, farmers, publicans, the whole nation are bracing themselves for pain as the Chancellor is set to give away more than £15 billion in a benefits bonanza. Well, let's bring in now GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, all eyes on Wednesday. I put it to you. We used to hide behind the sofa from Doctor Who. Now we hide behind the sofa from the Chancellor. Everybody is bracing themselves for pain, everybody except those on benefits. A 15 billion quid giveaway, and that means 9 million Brits who get up in the morning, go to work, they're bankrolling it all.
Those figures are from the opposition parties. The 15 billion comes from the Tory party, but the figures appear to stack up. They say that we're going to be seeing a £3 billion increase in the lifting of the child benefit cap, a £6 billion increase by increasing working age benefits and universal credit by 3.8% inflation, £5 billion from not cutting PIP, and 1.25 billion from reversing the removal of the winter fuel allowance. The Tories say that's 15.25 billion. That looks about right. The 9 million going into the 20% and 40% tax brackets, that's from the Lib Dems. Again, that's because of fiscal drag. We're expecting the Chancellor to freeze those levels at which those higher rates of income tax come in. So as inflation goes up, as wages get more people are dragged into it. That looks like what's going to happen on Wednesday. But this it reminds you of Christmas. I don't know how it is in the Daubney household, Martin, but essentially you spend money going into Christmas Day on the credit card and you're confronted by the bill on New Year's Day when it comes back. The bill from all the spending we've seen from the government over the past few days on freezing rail fares, they're lifting up the state pension, that will all be paid for on Wednesday and Thursday. So we're seeing the government spend money going into budget day and they try and chuck it all out at us. There's a big pile of tax measures, trying to hope they don't look too closely at the detail.
One of the early PR disasters for this government, of course, was that perceived war on pensions with the winter fuel allowance. That will be U-turned.
That's going to pay for.
Yeah, and as you said, a £550 a year boost to the state's pension as lifting up the whole of the benefits bill. Other areas, though, the mansion tax has been watered down. And I've heard little Birdie tell me that's watered down because a lot of those homes were in Labour constituencies in London. And the last thing that Labour MPs, for example, like Ellie Reeves, the sister of the Chancellor, wanted in Southwark is mansion tax bills going through the roof. So watered down there to save a bit of pain for Labour MPs, perhaps.
We don't know that. I mean, you have mentioned Keir Starmer in Holborn and St Pancras. That's the most obvious one there. But I don't know if that's the case. They would say they govern for the country, not for individual MPs, voters and the like. But yeah, I mean, we are looking at probably an extra 2 letters onto the council tax bill, and it'll be reappraised for homes worth over, I think it's 2 million or 2.5 million. So these are big houses paying more. But I think, yes, that we are seeing concerns at the weekend, of course, about rich people leaving the UK because they don't want to pay more. Most people, though, can't afford to just leave the country. They have to work here, so they're stuck with it.
But the richest can, and that was always going to be the case. We were saying on this very channel right from the very beginning, the billionaires, the millionaires, they don't passively sit around and wait to get fleeced. They clear off.
And that's why the top rate, I think, was held at 45p for so long. Gordon Brown put it up to 50p, and that was taken down to 45p by George Osborne in 2011, I think it was. The justification there was that if you raise it to 50p, that means that most people who are that wealthy just avoid the tax altogether. 45p, you tend to claw in more well-off people. So there's a view that if you go too high on the tax take, you lose the rich, very rich people who pay most of the tax in this country.
And also no cheers for boozers. We're expecting alcohol duty 15p on a bottle of plonk, 47p on a bottle of spirit, 7p on a 4-pack of lager, 13p on a bottle of fizz, and yet more bad news for the beleaguered hospitality sector.
Well, that's right. And they're of course, we're hearing from Andrew Griffiths in the 3-hour programme. They are worried, businesses are worried about the impact of these new regulations brought in by the Angela Rayner bill on business regulation. A new consultation is due on that. I'm looking, by the way, at fuel duty. I wonder whether that freeze may not be carried on, and also looking at pension sacrifice. So if you work for a company, the company puts money into your pension, that could be capped. So two bad areas there which will be really hit working viewers and listeners.
Could be a world of pain on Wednesday. Chris Oakes, stick with us. I want to get on to my next story now, because among those concerned, of course, ahead of that budget are farmers. And they're staging a nationwide protest against proposed inheritance tax reforms today. And GBNews' Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is at a demo in Lincolnshire. Anna, you've been resolutely with the farmers all day there. How is their spirit? Are they hopeful of some kind of miracle on Wednesday from the Chancellor?
Well, they're certainly hoping for that, Martin. They say that they want to axe that inheritance tax on Wednesday, and that's what needs to be seen. Of course, today is the National Day of Unity for farmers, so farmers up and down the country have been doing demos on the roads, taking their tractors out and doing go-slows throughout the area to raise attention to their cause. Here, we're in North Killingholme at the moment, but near the Immingham docks is where these go-slows have been staged by the tractors from 6 o'clock this morning going on till 6 o'clock this evening. And it's just getting the message across to the public as well. They've all got signs like this on them. This one says, "Farmers backing Britain. We sow, we grow, we fight. No farm left behind." And you can see some of the signs behind us as well on these other tractors here. I'm joined by Andrew Pritchard. Andrew, thank you for joining us. You're an arable farmer and a sheep farmer. Why have you turned out today?
Because this government does not understand agriculture, and it makes no attempt to connect with agricultural farming leaders. We're having to resort to by our standards, militant action by driving our tractors around the dock roads at Immingham to unfortunately make other people's lives difficult. But we hope somehow, some way, government will take notice. Their decisions are going to destroy British agriculture. This country needs a secure supply of food. I'm not sure exactly how many days' supply of food we have in this country. I've read reports that say we've only got 6 days and reports that say we've only got 6 weeks. If a disaster strikes, 6 weeks does not allow much time to import new supplies of food into our country. The government's trying to apply a new inheritance tax on the farming industry. The farming industry just can't afford it. A fair tax is an affordable tax, and this tax is not affordable, and that's why we've all turned out. Farmers don't turn out easily. It's very, very difficult for us to leave the farm and come and protest. I just can't believe how awful this government is. They're anti-pensioners, they're anti-employers, they're anti-farmers, they're anti-business. I think they're anti-Britain. It's time they went.
And you've mentioned as well about food security, about the financial implications of this inheritance tax, but what about the emotional impacts for farmers?
it's a constant worry. If every farm business is going to have to find a fifth of its value at every generational change, it's just going to be too much. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are, a farm business cannot afford to, in essence, buy a fifth of the farm at every generational change. If you look around the countryside, you will see that the farming industry is not able to afford much new infrastructure. That just shows that we're not making enough money to make ends meet. This new tax will just be the last straw for so many, especially older farmers who haven't got very many years of life left. Their inheritors are very soon going to be faced with having to pay another 20% of the value of their farm.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for joining us on GB News this afternoon. So that's the message here from farmers in Lincolnshire, Martin, wanting that inheritance tax to be axed on Wednesday's budget.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you to Andrew, the farmer there. Now, moving on, I'm now joined by the Labour MP for Hendon, and that's David Pinto-Dzyinski. David, welcome to the show there. You heard a farmer in Lincolnshire. They're devastated by what's happened to them in farming. Could there be a miracle before Christmas for farmers on Wednesday?
I'm not going to speculate on the budget, Martin. I used to work for the Treasury, and I think if I did, I'd very, very firmly be off of their Christmas card list. And so we'll all need to hang on for Wednesday. But what I can tell you is, that this will be a budget with fairness at its heart. As the Chancellor said, it will be a budget focused on cutting the cost of living, cutting NHS waiting lists, and cutting the national debt. Now, and I know a lot of people face challenges out there. We're absolutely mindful of them, and we're absolutely determined to take them on, but we're also determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past, whether it's the incredibly damaging austerity we saw that cut public services and stunted economic growth, or whether it's borrowing beyond our means, which led to the Liz Truss meltdown, which layered loads of costs on all of us. But I think we've seen that there are tough decisions to be made, but the government's approach is already beginning to bear fruit, whether it's the 5 interest rate cuts, the 3 trade deals, or the fact that wages have gone up more in the first 10 months of this government than they did in the last 10 years of the Conservatives. But look, none of that's to take anything away from the difficult situation that people face. And look, there will be really tough decisions to be made, not least because we also know with the budget, the Office of Budget Responsibility will be releasing its review of productivity, which will really, expose the damage that the last government did to our economy and to living standards. But we're absolutely determined to bear down on that and to produce a budget for fairness.
David, how much longer are you going to keep blaming the Tories and Liz Truss? That was almost like a game of Labour bingo. You're in charge now. You guys are in charge. Look in the mirror. Own it.
Martin, stop a second. For a start, many commentators, including yourself, I believe, was mentioning for years afterwards the global financial crisis. But secondly, and more importantly, the Office of Budget Responsibility, at the cornerstone of this budget, will be releasing their review of the impact of the last government on national productivity. And we know it's going to probably, tell a bad picture. And we know that that's going to be at the heart of some of the challenges we face. That's not rehashing history. That's literally the core of what we're being presented as a government. Cleaning up the mess of 15 years doesn't happen overnight, but that is what we are doing.
David, let me put this to you. You promised consistently not to raise taxes on working people. That's a lie, because you will increase taxes on working people at the budget when you freeze the tax threshold. You talk about what rising wages, great, but that drags more people into more tax. 9 million people expected to pay extra tax as of Wednesday, and that's propping up a £15 benefits bonanza. You're not the party of working people, you're the party of people who are work shy.
Absolutely not. And by the way, it's this government that's trying to also clear up the mess of the 3 million jobless jobless that the last government left. And don't forget that it was under Mel Stride's leadership that we saw the biggest ever rise for a Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. The benefits bill went up by 33 billion quid on his watch. Well, we are the party of work, and we're absolutely determined to turn that around. But as I say, it doesn't happen overnight. But the way you get Britain working and the way you get this economy moving is by ensuring economic
billions of pounds to not work.
Sorry. Is by ensuring economic stability, which brings down interest rates. Hang on.
Can't you be more prudent?
Economic stability. Hang on a second. Let me finish. By bringing in economic stability and also by paying down the debt, because we are currently paying £1 in £10 of all of our revenue on debt. That's got to come down, because that will open up more money for our public services that we all deserve. But to break that cycle, we need to make the right decisions. That's exactly what this Chancellor will do.
OK, well, it'll be great news if you're on benefits on Wednesday. You get a nice inflation-based pay rise. Meanwhile, 9 million people who get up in the morning will be going out to work to pay for it. Let's see what happens on Wednesday. You say you don't want to speculate about the budget, David. It's been the most speculated budget in history. We know everything about it.
It is because of the action of this government that people who go out and work are, in real terms, real disposable incomes are up £800 in real terms per head. Wages, as I said, up more in the first 10 months of this government than in the last 10 years of the last one, right? We are making those changes, and in this budget we'll also see more help on the cost of living. Look, already in the last few days we've seen rail fares frozen for the first time in 30 years. That'll save someone coming in to London from Milton Keynes commuting £315 a year. We've seen massive changes unveiled to the asylum system. We've seen huge new projects, be it new munitions factories or nuclear power stations. We've seen prescriptions
change to asylum. It's gone through the roof in terms of its cost, David.
And costs that we are actually addressing. We brought down the cost of asylum hotels already. We've only been in power for a year by £1 billion, Martin.
10,000 illegal immigrants have come in since Shabana Mahmood became the Home Secretary.
Sorry. Rome wasn't built in a day. There's a lot to clear up, but we are making real progress. And you've seen in this government real action already just in the last week to tackle the cost of living, with a lot more to come. And that's what this budget will give.
David, I always appreciate a spirited exchange on the show. I sincerely, I think you're a great sparring partner. Labour MP for Hendon, thanks for coming on. Let's do it again in the future. David Pinto-Dujinski, always an absolute pleasure. Now, moving on, friends of GB News can vote in today's You Decide poll by scanning the QR code right now on your screen. Today, we're asking this: should Rachel Reeves raise taxes if it gets the economy back on track? So far, 9% of you want to give away more of your money. If you'd like to send some in to me and Chris Hope, please do. And 91% have said no, we don't want to give any more money to this great benefits bonanza. Now, still to come, reforms Zia Yusuf has hit back as the Tory chairman compared the party to the Nazis.
Thought it was a joke, it's certainly not funny, and the fact that he took it down and then put it back up again and it remains there tells you everything you need to know.
You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, and we're Britain's #1 news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates,
lively conversation,
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
and each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray,
Are you a human trafficker?
boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is...
you're
the failure is...
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:28. You with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, Kemi Badenoch, well, she's defended the Conservative Party chairman, Kevin Hollenrake, after he compared reform to the Nazi Party. Take a listen to what the leader of the opposition said.
I think given that when Sarah Pochin said she didn't like seeing black and brown faces on TV, Nigel Farage refused to apologise, I'm not going to apologise for a tweet that was made in jest. There's far too much time spent on silly things like tweets at a time when we've got a budget on Wednesday. Your viewers are out there really worried about what's going to be coming, more tax rises. As leader of the opposition, my job is to focus on Labour. People can make jokes on Twitter, that's fine. Right now, I've got to focus on what's going on out there.
A tweet made in jest. Nothing to see here. Well, let's see if that's the case now. My next guest, I'm joined by the Global Affairs Advisor at Reform UK, and that's Dr. Alan Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza, a pleasure to have you on the company. There's no way of sugarcoating this question. I'm just going to ask you, are you a Nazi?
No, surprisingly, Martin, I'm not a Nazi, and I think it's a singularly ill-advised tweet from the chairman of a Conservative Party to be doing. This is a kind of antic you expect from, the far left. And for him to have done it and then not have apologised, it wasn't done in jest. I'm sorry. You had to actually have done some serious research to get to that rather ridiculous idea that some Nazi gold coin was similar to what the Reform Party is putting out on a pin badge. I mean, it's just pathetic, and I don't understand why Kemi Badenoch's defending, and I don't understand why the tweet was put up and not been taken down since.
It's also worth pointing out that a plethora of football clubs, if you know anything about the sport, have had black kit with gold badges. Top of that list is Maccabi Tel Aviv. Yeah, that famous fascist football club from Israel. That's, of course, the biggest Jewish football club on the planet. So it's moronic to say this is singularly linked to Reform UK. But I want to ask you about the degree, the level, the standard of political debate here. We've almost come to expect this from the political left. You're a fascist, according to Ed Davey. If you're even to the right of Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen Sir Keir Starmer compare people on the streets to those in the far right. But is this particularly hurtful for you? I mean, until very recently, you were a member of the Conservative Party. To be called a Nazi by your former colleagues must be doubly damaging.
Well, I simply think it's a very unconservative thing to do. This is not what Conservatives claim to behave. That's not the way that they do things. And yet to stoop to the gutter in this way, if you want to engage the battle of ideas, fine, engage in the battle of ideas, say you don't agree with something. But to bring in, lazy gesture politics like this is unconservative, number one. And it, frankly, it just doesn't befit serious politicians. So it does go back to that level of discourse. What is going on in our politics today, where this becomes sort of acceptable and is laughed off, when in reality it reflects a sad decline in standards. And that is not what we should be doing full stop across the political spectrum.
Dr. Mendoza, I guess the counterpoint would be, well, we have freedom of speech, people should be able to take a joke, but I guess the point that you might make is that words can have consequences, particularly of this sense of othering your political opponents. If you call people Nazis, you compare them to Adolf Hitler, you could potentially put them in actual real-world danger.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. There is obviously the sense that if you, as you say, other the opponent, make them seem beyond the pale politically, you can encourage, extreme reactions to them. But I think really it's just a lazy shortcut to, engaging in debate and discussion. If you lob that at someone, you've kind of tried to end the conversation, haven't you? You've gone, they're so bad that all I've got is this. But in reality, we all know that there are millions of Reform voters out there, a number of whom used to be in the Conservative Party. So, for this to have been pushed out by the Conservative Party seems to me a bit of an own goal in trying to get those people back. The reality is that Reform voters are not Nazis. The Reform Party is not a Nazi party. And the very fact that we're debating this tells us how low politics has become, because rather than discussing the ideas and the big questions of the day, we're talking about meaningless labels when we should be talking about, indeed, the big questions coming up later this week.
Dr. Alan Mendoza, that's the Global Affairs Advisor at Reform UK. Thank you very much for your time today on GB News. Now we have to cross over now. Let's cross to Westminster, where BBC officials are being probed over editorial standards.
For everybody in the room, all those watching. But suffice to say, it can't be overstated what is a critical time for the BBC and public service broadcasting in general. How did we get here?
Well, I suppose the saga does begin with that memo that I wrote, and at the most fundamental level, I wrote that memo, let me be clear, because I am a strong supporter of the BBC. The BBC employs talented professionals across all of its factual and non-factual programmes, and most people in this country, certainly myself included, might go as far as to say that they love the BBC. What troubled me was that during my 3 years on the BBC's Standards Committee, we kept seeing incipient problems which I thought were not being tackled properly. And indeed, I thought the problems were getting worse. And what was especially troubling about this was that it was all happening just at the time when the BBC faces this fabulous, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because in the era of fake news, the BBC really can become the go-to provider of news for the entire world. I think that's something that could happen. I would like it to happen, but it can only happen successfully if the BBC, I think, does a better job addressing these incipient and growing problems of the type that the Standards Committee kept identifying. And that's why I tried to alert the BBC board to what was going on, and indeed thereafter sent the memo on to Ofcom and DCMS. There was no ideology at play here, no party politics. If, for example, if you take the example of the US elections report that came before the committee, if it had found that it had been Kamala Harris misrepresented, not Donald Trump, I would have acted in exactly the same way, because I don't want the BBC's coverage skewed this way or that way. I just want it to be impartial, accurate and fair.
So were you surprised that your memo about BBC editorial standards led to the resignation of the head of BBC News and then the Director General?
I was, because I never envisaged events playing out in the way they did. I was hoping the concerns I had could and would be addressed privately. In the first instance, that was why I wrote to the board. For reasons I can go into if you wish, it became pretty clear to me the board was not taking stuff as seriously as I'd hoped and assumed it would. So I then sent the memo on to Ofcom and DCMS. Now, I'm very clear, and members of this committee, you're experts in this stuff, you'll know this, that the Ofcom and DCMS have very limited powers over the BBC, and quite rightly so, because the BBC is independent. But nevertheless, what I had hoped was that someone senior, be it at DCMS or be it from Ofcom, might have a classic quiet word with the high-ups at the BBC saying, you are taking this with adequate seriousness, are you? And indeed, we now know, since the leak, that I think Michael Grade at Ofcom has said he was planning to, or I hope I'm not misrecalling this, I think he said he was planning to have some kind of discussion with the BBC. So I was hoping this could all be sorted out fairly quietly. As it happens, I think it was 6 days after I sent the memo on to Ofcom DCMS, there it was in the Telegraph. And that then led to this whole sequence of events, including the resignations you mention, resignations which I take absolutely no pleasure in.
And in his resignation statement, Tim Davie described the BBC as a critical ingredient of healthy society and that we should champion it, not weaponise it. Who do you think he was aiming that comment at?
Yeah, I saw that, and look, obviously you'd have to ask Tim Davie himself, but my suspicion is that that last bit of his remark was targeted at big C Conservatives who were piling in after this appeared in the Telegraph. So the whole chain of events was not ideal from my point of view, not least because the fact that it was the big C Conservatives. By the way, I don't want to be rude, okay? Anyone who saw that memo and its contents and took it seriously and had concerns, including big C Conservatives, I'm glad. I don't want people to think I'm getting at one party rather than the other. But it is a matter of fact that because you had these big C Conservatives coming out welcoming it, I think some people came to jump to the conclusion there's some sort of ideological exercise going on here. But from my point of view, there really wasn't. I don't want the BBC leaning this way or that way. I just want it straight and impartial and fair.
In her resignation statement, Deborah Turner said that the recent allegations that the BBC News is institutionally biased are wrong. Do you think the BBC is institutionally biased?
No, I don't, and I'm sure someone's going to correct me pretty quickly if I'm wrong, but I just reread the memo yet again outside the door here. I don't think I used that phrase anywhere in the memo, and I do not think it's institutionally biased. Let's be very clear. Tons of stuff the BBC does is world-class, both factual programming and non-factual programming. I was a political correspondent at the Daily Mirror, Sunday Times, other places for 14 years. I think the standard of BBC Westminster is exemplary. And that's why I keep saying these were incipient problems. We were finding the odd problem here, the odd problem there. And the crucial thing was, when I say odd problem here and there, every single thing we spotted, as per my memo, seemed to me to have systemic causes. And the root of my disagreement and slight concern even today is that the BBC was not, and I hope they will change, but will they, treating these as having systemic causes. There's real work that needs to be done at the BBC.
Do you think that the failings that you highlighted were serious enough to require the resignation of the DG and the head of news?
Not if they had a plan to get on top of things and treat these things as systemic problems. I mean, look, I'm keenly aware. I don't want to come before you sounding like I'm some sort of pompous figure, right? It's not necessarily for me, humble old me, to tell the Director General of the BBC exactly how to do his job, but you've asked me a straight question. I would have hoped they'd get on top of these problems, start sorting them out in a systemic and more methodical way, and everything would have been fine.
What do you think, Carolyn?
Well, my experience was that the BBC took issues of impartiality extremely seriously. We've all heard Tim Davie put impartiality at the centre of his time as Director General. In the 3 years I was involved with the BBC, and prior to that with the Sirota Review, I felt it was a continuous process, an active debate. These are dynamic issues. They're very complicated issues often of impartiality. They're decided in the context of individual programmes on a daily basis across thousands of hours of coverage. So there was a healthy debate. I mean, you've heard from Michael, we can, in the GSC, it was a healthy debate and often a very robust debate about some of these issues. But in my view, was the BBC willing to have a proper conversation, debate, and actually take action? In my view, yes, they were.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before we get into a little more about the issues arising in the memo, can we talk a little bit about the role of the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee? You're here obviously as external advisors to it. Can you just talk about the purpose of it, how each of you were recruited and appointed to it?
Yeah, do you want to go first, Caroline?
I can go first if you like, Jeff. So I got involved with the BBC first of all via the Nick Sirota Review. I'd spent 20 years in journalism, most of it at the Financial Times, but also at the New Statesman and The Economist magazine. The BBC really matters to me as an institution. I think it's extremely important, and as Michael said, particularly in the era of AI, when I spent a lot of time on AI, when 52% of the internet is supposed to be generative AI generated, I think it's an extraordinarily important institution to get this right. I worked on the Nick Sirota Review for about 6 months. It was a significant review. And then when the opportunity came up to become an editorial advisor to the committee, I was very keen to help enforce what we'd found in the Sirota Review. There are multiple recommendations in the Sirota Review, which I can walk through, but at a high level, one did include having broader editorial advisors on the committee. And that's what led to us being appointed. Part of that was led by Ofcom, who wanted to expand the range of editorial opinion available to the BBC. The second thing which came out of the Sirota review, which was a key part of our implementation and actually the day-to-day work in the committee, was the introduction of new thematic reviews. These are really significant pieces of work. They took many months of work. They were usually hundreds of interviews behind them, and they were very comprehensive reviews of impartiality and BBC coverage. So we looked at immigration, for example, on the committee. They looked at the role of coverage of the economy. These were very important pieces of work, and I think they are comprehensive and extremely detailed. And they were ongoing. Alongside that, there were independent reviews of programmes, there was monitoring of impartiality, there were new guidelines initiated in terms of training. So if I that's a quick sketch, there were many other, I think we had 39 recommendations from the Sirota review in the end that we were involved in implementing on behalf of the committee. So a lot of the work in the first 2 years was very much implementing the Sirota review and the outcomes.
It's a fantastic run-through by Caroline. I'm not sure, is there any bit of your question you think is unaddressed that I can actually add value with?
Well, I suppose, am I right to read into what Caroline said then, that you're looking, in terms of these thematic reviews, you're not just looking at things that have gone wrong, the committee, you're looking at future challenges, proactive kind of looking ahead?
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that first. So one of the key tasks of the committee is future editorial risks. So, Michael's account gives a personal view of what was of issues on the committee for him. One of the issues I was particularly interested in, and really important obviously, is the role of AI. And is the BBC embracing AI, thinking about it appropriately? And in an era of fake news, it's even more important. So we did have reviews of looking at the role of AI at the BBC. When I left the BBC in the role, one of the issues I spoke to Chris Saul about was how far are we making sure the committee continues to have enough time for really deep dives into future editorial risks. Much longer sessions on some of those issues I think would be really welcome.
So, again, Caroline summarised it fantastically. These thematic reviews, to your point, so they are proactive. They're not waiting for an obvious thing to go wrong, or was that quite right? Which was the case with a lot of things in my memo. But even on the thematic reviews, you see, my disagreement with the BBC is about the thoroughness with which it takes action and follows things through in this area of editorial standards. So if you take one of the thematic reviews, I think it may have been the first one, which was on tax and spend. How does the BBC cover issues to do with the economy, government tax spending, and so on. And there were a number of recommendations from that. One of them being, for example, that it should become routine that if someone is on a News Current Affairs show and says we need more money spent on X, then they should be challenged, well, that's fine, what's the trade-off? Do you want tax to go up, whatever? That was one of many, but a very simple to understand recommendation from that review. And I remember when the conclusions came before the committee, I think it was my first or second meeting, I asked what the follow-up was going to be. For example, because at that stage I didn't know the ins and outs of how every bit of the BBC worked. So I said, after each news show or current affairs show, will there be a tick list? Were people challenged in accordance with these new recommendations? And I was pretty much told, look, don't worry about it. Everyone knows this report, everyone in the BBC's read it, everyone takes it very seriously. Now, one way and another, because partly because of my long, years ago as a journalist for 20 years, I know all sorts of people in the BBC, from a junior sub-editor I worked with in the 1980s to very senior people. Not one person I spoke to had read the report. Very few were aware of it. And later on, when we got follow-up reports, they did not give a gold star 10 out of 10 for implementation. So every step of the way, I'm afraid, I feel the BBC fell short on thoroughness when it came through to implementation.
And to what extent is that the fault of the committee? You talked about there are systemic causes and systemic problems. Is that where do they lie?
I think, I'm afraid to say this, ultimately with management, the Standards Committee has got independent advisors, Caroline, myself, it's got non-executive members. I do give credit to the management, by the way, and this may sound a trivial point, I was always impressed with it. These would be meetings that would go on 2-3 hours. The Director General, Head of News, Deputy Director of News always made time, fully attended, paid full attention. But to your question, I don't think it was the committee that was at fault. I think there's simply something. The BBC, I just think, had a bit of a blind spot when it came to following through as methodically as I appreciate I'm only one individual, but as I thought they should.
Is that the fault of individuals, though? You talked about systemic, but it sounds like you're putting the blame on individuals for not following through.
Well, I don't know whether it's a management culture thing or an excess of faith in how things will be implemented down at programme editor level. But to get to the answer to that, that's exactly the kind of thing I'd like them to look into. By the way, I mean you're almost borderline now talking about these systemic faults that I'm so obsessed about. I think they needed to look at why the implementation was not better.
Thanks, Jeff. Can I just?
And that is the BBC chairman, Samir Shah. They're facing a grilling in Parliament on editorial standards at the BBC. Seemed quite resolute that there wasn't much of a problem. Were you surprised that Tim Davie was forced to quit? He was asked. Yes. I'd expected Ofcom to have a word and it could be settled out quietly, he said. But then it was all over the Telegraph. Well, that was one of your own editorial whistleblowers that decided it warranted to be whistle-blown. He then seemed to lay the blame on big C Conservatives. Clear intimation there, this was a political pile-on. The whole chain of events was a surprise to me. Big C Conservatives, he said, piled in. Do you think that the BBC is institutionally biased, he was asked. No, I don't. Nothing to see here, he said. There were no cases where no systemic causes of this editorial difference, and he then intimated, which would never happen, that if this were bias against Kamala Harris, he'd have been just as concerned. But the BBC has never piled into Kamala Harris in the way it did to Donald Trump. I thought that was a thoroughly unsatisfactory way of facing the music, seeming to palm it off onto the Telegraph, onto Conservatives, onto anybody else apart from himself. Well, let's join now the former BBC journalist, David Keeley. David, welcome to the show. I don't know if you were listening in as I was there. I think there was a supreme lack of any accountability there from the BBC chairman, Samir Shah.
I agree entirely. I think I've been monitoring BBC output professionally for 26 years now. And what it highlights is that the BBC is its own judge and jury still, and they don't seem to be able to, even though obviously Michael Prescott was an external advisor, they don't. That was just they appointed two when that system was put in place after the Sirota report. They just don't seem to be institutionally able to take on board that the BBC's impartiality is the central duty of its charter, and in order to make sure that that is the case, they need to be absolutely transparent with audiences rather than to themselves that is actually happening. And in order to do that, there needs to be much more
an important discussion.
Systemic internal reviewing of the output.
And another question that he was asked there, Samir Shah, by the board, were the accusations severe enough, in your opinion, to warrant these resignations? No. Not in my opinion, they weren't, he said. It just makes you wonder, David, what planet these people are on. I'm sorry to be so brusque. Clearly, the findings here were provably anti-Trump, provably anti-Israel, provably pro-trans, provably pro-net zero. It's in clear black and white. And yet, to the BBC chairman, nothing to see here.
Absolutely. And I jump slightly to another development that there's been over the past week, which is the publication of the book by Andy Weber, former BBC journalist, about the Princess Diana affair. And his findings, which obviously are in parallel to this, are absolutely astounding. The reality is that the BBC have continued to cover up about the Princess Diana interview, not the actual forgery that happened, but who was responsible internally for the best part of 30 years. And the saga is still not over. And yet the BBC as recently as a couple of years back, after they were condemned in the Dyson report, which looked at what was happening in the Princess Diana interview, it was still withholding internal information, which Andy Webb tried to get at by freedom of information request. But initially he was denied, and they were told he was told initially there were 70 memos here. Then mysteriously there were 2,488, and they were massively redacted when they came out. Now, that's the epitome of cover-up and lack of transparency, and yet it is still going on a saga that's lasted for 25 years. So that pinpoints that the BBC internal monitoring processes, their internal awareness of their responsibilities is in a terrible place.
And David, I thought it was very, very revealing there. But a lot of people have said for too long the BBC has been able to mock its own homework. And you and I both know if there's an Ofcom complaint against the BBC, they're afforded the opportunity to try and deal with it internally before it goes to an official investigation. A luxury not afforded to broadcasters, for example, such as GBNews. And even here, you heard Samir Shah basically saying, I'd expected Ofcom to have a quiet word and it could be solved, it could be sorted out quietly and internally. But then it got all over the Telegraph. Heaven forbid the BBC has to face any form of external examination and criticism like any other news source on the planet.
Yes, and I mean, again, this is an area I've been campaigning on for a very long time. The reality is that the BBC are their own judge and jury of output. We challenged that in a judicial review earlier this year, and astoundingly, the verdict in that judicial review was that the BBC would only ever countenance from external sources reviews which were based on single programme items. Now, my organisation, Newswatch, has been submitting reports based on systemic review of the type that the chairman was talking about then, and yet they would never even consider that kind of report. Our reports are up online. There are over 40 of them done over the years, and they show that there is absolutely systemic bias, mainly in the coverage of the Brexit issue, which is where we look mainly. But that's indicative of the problem of as a whole. The only way of solving this, as I say, is a much more transparent, and I think that there should be an independent ombudsman responsible for BBC complaints, not the BBC itself.
David Keeley, we have to leave it there, run out of time. Excellent guest. Please come back on the show. That's fantastic stuff. Thank you. Now, still to come, only 48 hours until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget. Who will be the winners? Who will be the losers? All of the analysis coming up on GB News. Common sense, no nonsense. This is GB News, Britain's #1 news channel. First, though, here's your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day to come tomorrow. It'll still be on the cold side, if anything a little chillier than today, but the winds will be lighter. There's a pretty brisk and nagging wind blowing around this area of low pressure today. It's been bringing in plenty of showers. They'll continue into the evening, certainly across northeastern England and eastern Scotland. A bit of snow over the tops of the hills, but most of these showers are of rain. Some getting into the west as well, so West Wales, far southwest of England, but many places will be dry. With clear skies over western Scotland and northwest England, that's where we're likely to have a frost. Temperatures dipping a few degrees below freezing in rural spots, but many places staying just a little bit above freezing, in part thanks to that fairly brisk and cold feeling wind. Now that wind will ease as we go through the day on Tuesday, certainly not as strong as today, and there won't be as many showers coming into Aberdeenshire as there have been today. Across western Scotland, we start with that frost. There'll be a few showers, particularly early on across Northern Ireland Ireland, but we should also see some sunshine here. Showers grazing the westernmost fringes of Wales, Pembrokeshire, and also Cornwall seeing some showers along with the Isles of Scilly. And again, across eastern counties of England, quite a bit of cloud, certainly to begin with, and a few showers coming in here. But as I said, not as many showers as today, and they should tend to ease, and many areas will be fine and bright. Plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, southern England, and good-looking day for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. The showers in the northeast of Scotland also fade. Temperatures are a degree or so down on today's, but because the winds are lighter and with a bit of sunshine, perhaps it won't feel as cold, but still those numbers below average for the time of year. And look at the blue hue taking hold of the map through Tuesday evening. It's going to turn pretty frosty pretty quickly. So a cold start to Wednesday, and then we see a change through the week with more cloud, outbreaks of rain, but it will turn milder, especially on Thursday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for our more than 2 million YouTube subscribers and more than 2 billion views. That is Britain watching, sharing, and making its voice heard louder than ever before.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A75 at Crocketford is closed due to an incident. Motorists should find alternative routes and allow extra travel time. There's congestion on the M25 anti-clockwise entry slip at junction 1A, causing 10-minute delays, expected to ease by 4:15. In Lancashire, a broken-down vehicle on the A56 southbound between junctions, A679 and A680, is causing a lane closure, with normal conditions expected by 4:10. And on the trains, there is major disruption across the Elizabeth line, and Greater Anglia is experiencing difficulties between London Liverpool Street and Brimsdown. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can enjoy Christmas on us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. Here's what's coming up on today's blockbuster of a show. With only 48 hours left until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget. Taxpayers, businesses, pensioners, farmers, publicans, everybody in Britain is bracing themselves for pain. Who'll be the winners and who'll be the losers? What will it mean for you? GB News will give you unparalleled, no-nonsense insight all the way through until D-Day. And BBC top brass live pictures on your screen are presently facing a grilling in Parliament today with huge questions about anti-Trump, anti-Israel bias and pro-trans agendas. Panorama whistleblower Michael Prescott on your screens there, that's him, is among those facing the questions as we speak. Can the BBC survive this latest scandal? GB News will be there for you live and direct. And the Tory party chairman is facing a blitzkrieg of criticism after he compared a gold reform logo to the Nazis' golden party badge. Well, early today, GB News spoke to Kemi Badenoch.
I'm not going to apologise for a tweet that was made in jest. There's far too much time spent on silly things like tweets at a time when we've got a budget on Wednesday.
And look at that sheep there, it's woke. A fashion designer has been accused of ramming woke politics down our throats by releasing a designer clothing range made of wool from, wait for it, gay sheep. On today's show, I'll ask a sheep farmer, can a sheep actually be gay, or is this just a bad joke? The world is now so mad, you don't need to make anything up. It's happening all around our eyes. BBC are presently being probed in Parliament. Thus far, there seems to be zero self-awareness. They made huge operational errors around editorial bias, around Donald Trump, around Israel, net zero, and the trans agenda. Instead, they would have liked to have had a cosy backroom chat with Ofcom to allow them once again to mark their own homework and save the resignations of Tim Davie on their top brass. But I'm afraid the veil has been pulled back. The people can see now the Wizard of Oz is just a man pulling levers. The BBC needs to face the music, the same as any other broadcaster. Why should they get immunity, especially when you, the British taxpayer, paying for it? Talking of which, Wednesday and the BBC, we used to hide behind our sofas from Doctor Who. These days, we hide behind our sofas from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Are you bracing yourself for impact on Wednesday? Let us know how. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. Now it's time for your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 4. Rachel Reeves is facing a clear warning today ahead of this week's budget. Big business groups say she must not punish firms with 1,000 small tax hikes and should make tough choices elsewhere instead. They argue that Labour needs to show it's serious about growth, not add more costs as the economy is slowing. It comes as the budget watchdog has cut its growth forecast now for every year until 2029, blowing a hole in the Chancellor's plans. Rachel Reeves is now weighing up options, including higher taxes on the most expensive homes, freezing income tax thresholds for longer, and a bigger crackdown on benefit fraud, all as she works to fill that multi-billion-pound gap. Well, sticking with the economy, the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch took aim today at Labour's employment rights bill, saying Britain needs more people in work.
My first job was on the high street. I started at McDonald's, and then I got a job in New Look, part-time. Those were the places that gave me a chance to learn. Many of you in this room probably had your first job during a summer holiday or on a Christmas shift. These opportunities are at a real risk of disappearing because of this legislation. This is not industrial relations, this is industrial intimidation.
Senior BBC figures are being grilled by MPs as the fallout from the Trump Panorama scandal deepens. They're questioning Michael Prescott, the former advisor whose leaked memo accused the BBC of misleading viewers with its edit of Donald Trump's January the 6th speech. It's a row that also triggered 2 top resignations and a looming multi-billion-dollar legal threat from the US president. Well, Mr Prescott is appearing alongside fellow advisor Caroline Daniel before the BBC chair, Samir Shah. Robbie Gibb and Caroline Thompson also face the committee. MPs want answers, including, well, why did mistakes get covered up? Does the memo point to deeper systemic bias inside the BBC? And why did it take so long to apologise? Today's hearing will test, of course, whether those questions finally get straight answers. Sir Keir Starmer says there's real progress, but still hard yards ahead as he prepares to lead fresh talks on the possible peace plan for Ukraine. Downing Street says US-Ukraine negotiations in Geneva marked a major step after weeks of pushback from Europe over proposals that could limit Ukraine's military or force it to give up territory. Sir Keir Starmer says any deal must deliver a just and a lasting peace, stressing Ukraine must decide its own future and confirming he will host a virtual meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing tomorrow.
To be just, and obviously matters for Ukraine have to be determined by Ukraine, but it's also got to be lasting, it's got to endure. So that's the focus. There's more work to do. As you know, along with President Macron, I've been leading the Coalition of the Willing, which is a group of countries that have put in place support for Ukraine, particularly capability. And I'm now planning that we will meet virtually tomorrow. So we will host a Coalition of the Willing call to further discuss the progress that is being made and I hope can be made.
The former Prime Minister, Lord David Cameron, has revealed that he's been treated for prostate cancer. He said he was urged to get a PSA test by his wife, Samantha, and was later diagnosed after an MRI scan and a biopsy. After being successfully treated, the former Prime Minister says he now wants to use his position to call for screenings to be offered to high-risk men. The Princess of Wales has today called for the stigma faced by those with addictions to end and for society to show compassion and love to those dependent on drugs, on alcohol or gambling. In a message to mark Addiction Awareness Week, the Princess says that society's experience of addiction is shaped by fear, shame and judgment, urging people to have open conversations and bring the issue out of the shadows. Princess Catherine is patron of the Forward Trust, a charity supporting recovering addicts that's behind this week's campaign. And Jimmy Cliff, the Jamaican reggae singer and actor, has died at the age of 81. In a statement today, his wife, Latifah Chambers, wrote, "It is with profound sadness that I share that my husband, Jimmy Cliff, has crossed over due to a seizure followed by pneumonia." A two-time Grammy-winning artist, Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2010. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with you shortly. Next, though, a look at the markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews Financial Report.
7 minutes past 4, the markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.3104 and €1.1354. The price of gold is £3,112, 12 pence, that's per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 9,547 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Breaking news happening right now. Live pictures on your screens. The former BBC advisers, they're being probed. They're being questioned by MPs in Parliament after claims of bias in a leaked memo. Now, this includes, of course, the former independent adviser to the BBC's editorial guidelines, Michael Prescott. He's the gentleman there being currently investigated. That's not Samir Shah, as I claimed previously. This is Michael Prescott, that whistleblower. He said, though, that the real work needs to be done. He doesn't believe that the corporation is institutionally biased. He doesn't think anybody should have resigned. Instead, he blamed big C Conservatives. He blamed outside sources. He'd have liked a cosy chat with Ofcom and sorted this internally. I'm afraid that won't wash. Now, the current BBC chairman, Dr. Samir Shah, hasn't spoken yet. But when he does, we'll bring you that live in the show. The BBC under the cosh. Can they survive this latest scandal? Moving on, there's less than 48 hours to go now until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget. Taxpayers, businesses, pensioners, farmers, publicans, practically everybody out there, apart from those on benefits, of course, are bracing themselves for pain as the Chancellor is set to give away more than £15 billion in benefits bonanzas. Meanwhile, 9 million other people could be dragged into paying higher rates of tax thanks to the dread of fiscal drag. Well, let's bring in now GBNews political editor Christopher Hope, the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Andrew Griffith MP, and my political commentator today, Matthew Stadland. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Chris, I'm going to start with you. Most people are looking through their fingers at this. They're scared about what might come out of it. The last budget was bad enough. Might this one be worse?
Well, it could be. I mean, they raised 20 billion, maybe 25 billion. That'll put it up there as being a serious budget. They're spending money at the moment. Of course, that's what happens in the days up to a budget. We're seeing money spent on freezing rail fares, increasing the state pension. Today's story, though, is calculations done by the Tory party saying that 15.25 billion worth of benefits will be going ahead from Wednesday. That breaks down with the child benefit cap being lifted, 3 billion. The 3.8% increase in working age universal credit, 6 billion. PIP reform package dropped last summer because of the rebellion on the backbench is 5 billion, and of course the winter fuel reverse 1.25 billion. So right now the government always spends heavily into a budget, then tries to raise it very quickly and no one notices given the volume. And Andrew Griffiths to my left, of course, was formerly in the cabinet, knows how that works. But we are focusing on this. It does seem like taxes go up and money from the taxes goes to people who aren't working, and that's hard to sell.
Andrew Griffiths, let's bring you in now. We expected last time to see a £5 billion benefits cutback. Imagine our surprise to see we're now seeing a £15 billion benefits bonanza. I had a Labour Party MP on the show earlier on, and I said to him, how can you keep saying that you're the party of the working people when it's the work shy who seem to come out on top?
Absolutely. I mean, brace for impact on Wednesday. If you're a farmer, if you're a small businessman, if you're a pensioner, or if you're just one of the millions of people that gets up and goes to work, why would a government increase the welfare cap? You can already get up to £25,000 of benefits on welfare. Your viewers will be absolutely recoiling in horror, thinking about how much income they would have to generate before tax to be able to end up with anything like that amount in their pockets. It shows every sign that the sequel is going to be worse than the original in terms of a budget. You said, could it be worse? Well, last year it was pretty bad to raise £40 billion, mostly from businesses. That's damaged the economy. It's one reason why unemployment's gone up every month. But so much worse if we had this smorgasbord, right? What's a smorgasbord? In English, it's a buffet. But a three-month-old buffet, you know, and we've had 3 months running into that, is not an appetising prospect.
Yeah, a curled-up sandwich as an offering. Chris?
Well, just one thing. I mean, did you not think this government had to raise taxes to pay for the money that you had spent? You spent £500 billion on the COVID pandemic response, including the energy shock in Ukraine. Any government in power in the second part of this decade would be raising taxes. Is it not? Well, should not Labour, therefore, be more honest about it and say we have to meet the spending commitments done because of your government?
Oh, listen, I mean, Labour are blaming everyone since the dinosaurs for the decisions they're going to make. But it was a year ago today. It was a CBI conference this morning, Chris. I was there. A year ago today, the Chancellor said she's done. She's balanced the book. She's done her tax raising, and there'll be no more of that this Parliament. Previously, she'd said she wasn't going to put up taxes on working people, and yet one way or another, it's always working people who end up paying the price for this government. So look, I came from business. I'm not one of those people that think everything bad happened on the 5th of July 2024. There were mistakes that the Conservative Party made in office, mostly from not being conservative enough, and sometimes, in that case, spending too much of hard-earned taxpayers' money. But this government is making it incalculably worse.
Andrew, you have about your person there a formidable-looking mighty green tome. What on earth is that?
Well, I won't set about Chris with it in the way that the Labour Party are setting out the economy. This is the Unemployment Rights Bill, the Labour calls it the Employment Rights Bill, written by the trade unions. It mentions unions 500 times in its 330 pages. And it was what we were talking about at the CBI conference of big businesses, well, all businesses today, because it's going to make it harder to hire people. It means strikes will be easier. They're going to lower the threshold for strikes, make it easier for unions to take money off of workers. And, you know, the government loves to talk about growth. You know, they talk about growth till the cows come home. The reality is this is what they are doing. 330 pages of red tape. It's going to tie up businesses in knots, and not a single British business has come out in support of it. They want the government to drop it. It wouldn't cost the Chancellor anything to get up on Wednesday and say, look, we made a mistake. We're charged ahead. This is going to cost jobs. Unemployment is rising. We're going to kill this bill.
OK, Chris?
The government is consulting on that. 4 consultations. They say, though, in the meeting just now with the PM spokesman, they will not water down what they're up to. Well, I've got to ask you about these remarks from Kevin Hollingrake, suggesting that people who support Reform UK are somehow akin to the Nazis. Now, we've heard from Kemi Badenoch. She says it meant in jest. Is that what you think?
Well, look, Chris, I wouldn't have made that comparison. I don't think it's a comparison that helps anybody. But my focus, as in Kemi's, as I'm sure is Kevin's, is on fighting this government. We are in a real economic crisis. The economy's not growing. Ordinary folk, I think, are sitting there with those 48 hours to go, saying, look, what are the Conservatives doing? Quite rightly, to set out their alternative. We've done that. We've said we will make cuts. We would not raise the welfare cap, and we would do things like scrap Labour's trade union unemployment bill.
OK, Andrew Griffiths, thank you very much. Matthew Southern, you've been waiting very patiently to have your say. It's fair to say a lot of people are concerned about what's going to happen on Wednesday. The economy seems to have just hit the treacle. Everyone's gone into freeze-frame mode. There's been so much speculation these past months about will it, won't it be painful. Do you think, irrespective of what comes out, it's been pretty badly handled by the Labour comms team?
I think it's been badly handled. I think we've had so many kites being flown, and that's not, in my view, the way to run an economy. But I want to push back on some of the things that we've been hearing now. I think it was you who was talking about the work shy. You, Andrew, as a former Cabinet Minister, supported that word. There'll be plenty of people watching GB News this afternoon who are on benefits, who can't work for this reason or that. Let's not lump everyone in together by offensive terms like work shy. There are millions of people in this country.
A lot of people believe we need a benefits cutback, and in fact, so did the Labour Party.
Indeed.
The backbenchers wouldn't allow it.
Indeed, and I think there is a degree of consensus between Labour and the Tories at the moment that there does need to be some sort of overhaul of our welfare system. I just think the language that is used really matters. And I think calling people work shy is unhelpful.
What if they are work shy?
Well, you've got no evidence for that.
A lot of people are.
You've got no evidence for that. And just to move on briefly to the other area of welfare, which is the two-child benefit cap. So it is, I think, widely acknowledged that if that two-child benefit cap, which was brought in by George Osborne under a previous Tory administration, I think ferociously, fiercely opposed by Labour at the time, so there was a lot of upset when Labour didn't immediately reverse that. They were trying to show that they're being responsible with the economy. But that really impacts real children. And if it is widely accepted as it is, that by scrapping that two-child cap, you are going to alleviate child poverty for a lot of children, that has to be a good thing, because it is not the child's fault that they are born. Just briefly on how...
People could have less children.
They could, but once...
Why should taxpayers pay for people to have more children?
They could have fewer children, but once they've had children, the people who suffer are the children who are born through no fault of their own. I just want to come on to how tough times are. There's no doubt times are tough. It's not just people in the middle who are looking at this budget and being concerned. It's poorer people, it's richer people. Rachel Reeves said recently that everyone's going to have to pay their share. What I would just say is that Nigel Farage came out very recently with his economics plan, which is heavily revised from what he said ahead of the last election. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Nigel Farage was saying that he was going to make £90 billion or something of savings. That's come down to £20 billion. So it is not just this Labour government that is having trouble with the finances. It is emphatically Nigel Farage who's desperate to, apparently, become the next Prime Minister.
Well, he's resetting his party, having not been part of that manifesto being written because he became a candidate during the election campaign. So, to be fair to him, although he did say some of those measures, he's trying to rethink his fiscal...
He was still head of the party going into the election,
Yes, he was. He didn't disavow any of the manifesto going into the election, that's right. What is going on with Labour? In July last year, your PM... suspended 7 Labour MPs for lifting the child benefit cap. And then we fast forward 16 months later. The economy isn't any better. Now it's going to happen, apparently, on Wednesday. What are we to think of a party that suspends 7 MPs for doing one thing last year and now it's party policy? It's literally rudderless, right?
So Keir Starmer is all of our Prime Minister. And I hope we all want him to succeed.
He's your leader.
Well, he's not my leader.
Labour leader.
He's a Labour leader, and I certainly voted for Labour at the last election.
Do you regret that now?
No, but I think that they've made a mess of certain things. It's obvious. I mean, just for example, Rachel Reeves going back on the National Insurance Contribution pledge for employers, and that being spun as not being a manifesto pledge. And then after hitting the country with high taxes, there were reasons for that, so that they could help the NHS and so forth. But then to come back and say she's not coming back for any more, and then it's obvious she is going to come back for more. That is just really... That's
I need to get you on to my next story. I want to ask you about this...
I was going to say about the two-child cap.
No, I need to move you on. I want to ask you about the hoo-ha around the Reform Party badge and the Nazi golden badge made by the Tory chairman. Do you think that was a mistake? I think there are 2 rules about mentioning Hitler or the Nazis. Rule 1, don't. Rule 2, still tempted, see Rule 1. Don't go there.
What do they call it? Godwin's law. I've literally only seen the picture just before we came on air. It didn't immediately strike me as having anything to do with Nazi insignia. My grandparents were refugees from Nazi Germany. So unless you've got concrete evidence that there's something Nazi going on, clearly you shouldn't be using that word, in my view. Do I worry? Not that there will be Nazis who will become candidates for reform at the next election. But do I worry that some racists, some genuine out-and-out racists, will slip through the net in order for there to be enough reform MPs to run in 2029? Yes, I do. And should we be afraid to use the word racist in these modern times? No, we shouldn't.
What about
and
the
when
Green
you do
Party?
use the word racist correctly,
What about the racists
people
in the
who
Green
are
Party?
racist themselves will say, oh, you just say racist, it's lost all meaning. No, it hasn't. Racism is racism, and it
You
should be
called out the
called
racists
out,
in the Green
and it should be
Party,
called out.
in your party?
I would call out any racism whenever I see it, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-black racism, whatever it is, call it out. We should all be united on that.
OK, final word, if I could, to you, Andrew Griffiths. We're expecting pain on Wednesday. Is there any way you think that the Labour Party can salvage, let's face it, their opinion ratings aren't just on the floor, they're in the basement. Is there any way out of this for the Labour Party?
Well, certainly to not proceed on the way they're going, but I fear not. I think what we're going to see is a clear value set of decisions, on the one hand, in favour of those in the public sector, whether it's their pensions or their pay, those on welfare, against farmers, small businesses, pensioners, and those who get up and go to work in the morning.
Thank you very much. Andrew Griffiths, the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, with your mighty green tome. Chris Hope, dashing back from lobby as ever, breathless. And Matthew Southend, always a pleasure. You're with us for the rest of the hour. Superb stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Now, friends of GB News can vote in today's You Decide poll by scanning the QR code now on your screen. And today we're asking, should Rachel Reeves raise taxes if it gets the economy back on track? So far I've said yes. 9% of you said yes. You'd be happy for taxes to be raised. If you've got a nice cheque you'd like to send in to me and Chris Hope at GB News, please send it to our post box. 91%, however, say no. Taxes are already painful enough. A nice balanced poll there. 91% say don't raise taxes. Now, moving on, still to come, women are gathering right now in central London to protest about the continued placement of trans prisoners, that's biological men, in female jails. We'll be live from the protest with Olivia Utley. This is GB News on Britain's #1 news channel. Britain's economy is at a crossroads.
And this budget day, every decision counts.
From taxes and rent to the cost of living.
Whatever the outcome, the GB News family will be there
with expert analysis breaking down what it means for you.
Budget day, all day Wednesday, only here on the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Bold.
They are under no illusion.
Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 4:26. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, protesters are gathering today to rally against men being held in women's prisons. Attendees at the rally are also expected to discuss the Supreme Court's ruling on the definition of sex in law and how this applies to the prison system. Well, joining us now from the rally is GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, it's dark out there, looks pretty cold, and there's a frosty reception too from the protesters towards what they perceive is an invasion into women's spaces, an invasion of women's rights by allowing trans women, biological men, into the women's prison estate. Tell us more.
Yes, so I'm here outside Parliament on a soggy Monday afternoon where a group of women from all political parties and none have gathered to protest that trans women are now still included in women's prisons, despite a Supreme Court ruling more than 200 days ago, which stated that for the purposes of the law, trans women should be treated as men. I'm here now with Judith Wright from Men in Women's Prisons. Judith, can you tell us why you're so angry about this issue and what's drawn you to Parliament today?
Well, as you said, it's been over 200 days since the Supreme Court ruling on what a woman is. So the women's prisons should be single sex, but we know that there are still men in these women's prisons. And obviously, you know, this puts women prisoners at risk, and the government should do something about it.
Do you know why there has been this hold-up? Because it has been over 200 days. We would have expected now for women's prisons to be just for women, but that hasn't happened. Is it a hold-up from government? Who's stopping this happening?
Well, I don't know for sure, but it could be government, and it could be that you have trans lobby groups who are putting a lot of pressure on them. I don't really know, but the law is clear and they need to be out. And you know, there is a wing in Downview Prison called E-Wing where men who say they are women are housed. And the government keeps saying that this is not part of the women's estate, but it is. So they need to get out of that prison because it's a women's prison. And again, you know, as soon as you put men into a women's prison, it then becomes a mixed-sex prison, which is obviously dangerous for women there.
Thank you very much. That was Judith Wright. I mean, you can sense the anger here in Parliament. 200 days since that Supreme Court ruling stated that in law, trans women, people born as men, should be treated as men. And yet still there are prisons which are, by definition, mixed sex. There's a lot of anger here. Let's see if the government responds.
Thank you, Olivia Utley, and also to your guests there from outside a soggy-looking Parliament. Olivia Utley, thank you very much indeed. Let's get back to my studio guest, political commentator Matthew Stadland. Matthew, 200 days ago, the Supreme Court made a ruling. This sort of stuff should have been sorted out by now. It clearly stated that women are women and men are men, and the two shouldn't be crossing, particularly in sensitive spaces like prisons, and yet here we are, still rumbling on.
Yeah, I think the ruling, in summary, was that for the purposes of the Equalities Act, I think it was 2010, the Equalities Act, then sex means biological sex, doesn't it? And there would potentially be ramifications or repercussions for that, potentially changes of guidance, maybe even changes of law. I don't know the legal nuances of this particular case. It seems established from what we've heard there that there are biological women, trans women, in women's, biological men, trans women in women's prisons. I don't know whether there is any legal justification for that or not following that Supreme Court decision. I certainly have empathy for women in prison who might not want to have trans women sharing their spaces. And I don't know what actually happens, what accommodation there is for trans women in women's spaces, where they simply share all the facilities or not. You won't be surprised, not familiar with the situation in reality. But I also have empathy for trans women, particularly those who have actually undergone physical treatment. And I would worry for them in men's prisons, just as I'd worry for many of them going to the loo in men's loos. So this doesn't stop being a really difficult issue that affects people in the real world, both many women who are concerned about it, some women, of course, many women not concerned about it, and then trans women as well, and indeed trans men. It's a really difficult thing. And one of the things I objected to, this is all quietened down a little bit since the Supreme Court ruling. One of the things I objected to, and I'm sure many viewers objected to in the build-up to that ruling, was just the toxicity from portions of both sides of this debate, from some people defending women's rights and some people defending trans rights. It was so hot and it was so aggressive and it was so angry, whereas actually this required, I think, really deep thought and proper reasoning to try to get to the best outcome.
But the common sense outcome that we have seen since that ruling, for example, the International Olympic Committee has been abundantly clear. No longer can men pummel women. No longer can men have an unfair physical advantage in sport. They're slow in some cases to get on with the job, but that's the point, the fulcrum that we've reached. Surely, in places like prisons, there are ways that for my sins, I have been in prisons, not as an inmate, but as a visitor, as a journalist. Not yet, exactly. And the point is, there are ways of segregating. For example, those who are particularly dangerous paedophiles are kept on separate parts of separate wings. Those who have particularly potential to radicalise through their faith can be put apart. I'm not saying trans people are comparable to them. What I'm saying is there are ways of compartmentalising jails, and surely if trans women, biological men, are allowed into women's prisons, at least put them on a separate wing.
So that might, in practice, have real-world repercussions that I'm sure you wouldn't intend. Imagine there was one trans woman in a female prison. And as I've already said, I empathise with women who don't want to share that space, even though they're prisoners, they have rights. They don't want to share that space with somebody who's biologically male. But if you segregate for the entire duration of their term someone who is a trans woman, have all sorts of repercussions for that person's well-being and mental state. I think you might agree. So that it's a really tricky issue.
Well,
if there is
segregated all the time.
If it is legal, yeah, but as you say, Islamist extremists are segregated because they represent a genuine risk. Just because you are a trans woman doesn't mean you're a sex offender by any stretch of the imagination. They used to say the same thing about gay people, conflating gay people with paedophilia.
This is about women's safety.
It's absolutely outrageous.
But the easiest way of keeping women safe is by not having any biological men in their prison space.
This is about women's rights, and it's also about trans rights, and that's why this has been such a difficult issue, because you've got a clash of rights, and we want to try and make sure that as many people are happy with the outcome as possible. As I say, I understand what you're saying about the concerns that some women have. The legal issue here is, what is the law actually saying? Because I'm not an expert in this field. Well, is there a legal necessity for trans women to be removed from the female prisoner estate? If there is that legal necessity, then of course, under the law, they have to be removed.
Wasn't that the point of this Supreme Court ruling 200 days ago? That's what I think a lot of women's campaigns thought at the time. Matthew Stanley will come back to more of you throughout the show. Thank you very much. Lots more still to come between now and 5 p.m, including across back to Westminster as former BBC officials are probed. Live picture on your screen there on the issue of BBC editorial standards and systemic bias. First, though, it's time for news headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
4:34, the top story this hour. As we just heard, MPs are grilling senior BBC figures as the Trump panorama fallout deepens. First up, Michael Prescott, the advisor behind a leaked memo that accused the BBC of misleading viewers over Donald Trump's January the 6th speech. It's a row that's already sparked 2 resignations and a looming multi-billion-dollar legal threat. Samir Shah, Robbie Gibb and Caroline Thompson will also speak as MPs press for straight answers on delays, cover-ups and any deeper bias inside the BBC. Rachel Reeves is under mounting pressure ahead of the budget. Big business groups warn she can't load firms with 1,000 small tax hikes as the economy slows. With growth forecasts now cut every year until 2029, the Chancellor's weighing up tax rises on the top-end homes, longer freezes to income tax thresholds and tougher stances on benefit fraud. Sir Keir Starmer says there is real progress, but still hard yards ahead as he prepares to lead fresh talks on a Ukraine peace plan. Downing Street says US-Ukraine negotiations marked a major step, though concerns remain over any deal that could limit Kyiv's military or coast territory. Former Prime Minister David Cameron has revealed he's been treated for prostate cancer. He says his wife Samantha urged him to get a PSA test, leading to a diagnosis, then successful treatment. Lord Cameron now wants screening widened for high-risk men. And Jamaican reggae legend Jimmy Cliff has died at the age of 81. He says that his wife says he passed away after a seizure followed by pneumonia. A 2-time Grammy winner and Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, he helped bring reggae to the world stage. Those are your half-past headlines. I'll be back with the news at 5.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day to come tomorrow. It'll still be on the cold side, if anything a little chillier than today, but the winds will be lighter. There's a pretty brisk and nagging wind blowing around this area of low pressure today. It's been bringing in plenty of showers. They'll continue into the evening, certainly across northeastern England and eastern Scotland. A bit of snow over the tops of the hills, but most of these showers are of rain. Some getting into the west as well, so West Wales, far southwest of England, but many places will be dry. With clear skies over western Scotland and northwest England, that's where we're likely to have a frost. Temperatures dipping a few degrees below freezing in rural spots, but many places staying just a little bit above freezing, in part thanks to that fairly brisk and cold feeling wind. Now that wind will ease as we go through the day on Tuesday, certainly not as strong as today, and there won't be as many showers coming into Aberdeenshire as there have been today. Across western Scotland, we start with that frost. There'll be a few showers, particularly early on across Northern Ireland, but we should also see some sunshine here. Showers grazing the westernmost fringes of Wales, Pembrokeshire and also Cornwall, seeing some showers along with the Isles of Scilly. And again, across eastern counties of England, quite a bit of cloud, certainly to begin with, and a few showers coming in here. But as I said, not as many showers as today, and they should tend to ease, and many areas will be fine and bright. Plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, southern England, and good-looking day for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. The showers in the northeast of Scotland also fade. Temperatures are a degree or so down on today's, but because the winds are lighter and with a bit of sunshine, perhaps it won't feel as cold, but still those numbers below average for the time of year. And look at the blue hue taking hold of the map through Tuesday evening. It's going to turn pretty frosty pretty quickly. So a cold start to Wednesday, and then we see a change through the week with more cloud, outbreaks of rain, but it will turn milder, especially on Thursday.
Thank you, Britain, for sharing over 5 million comments on your say. Because when you talk, we listen.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A75 at Crocketford is closed. Motorists should use alternative routes. In Newcastle upon Tyne, the A1 southbound entry slip from the A69 is down to 1 lane due to a broken down vehicle. Traffic is impacted on the M4 westbound between junctions 10 and 11. In Surrey, a vehicle fire on the A3 northbound between the A3 and A283 Milford North has closed 1 lane. And on the trains, significant delays affect Greater Anglia between London, Liverpool Street and Brimsdown, with major disruptions on the Stansted Express. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, breaking news happening as we speak right now. Live pictures of former BBC advisers being questioned by MPs in Parliament, of course, after claims of bias leaked in that memo. This, of course, was around BBC Panorama. Let's take a little listen in.
Everything the David Grossman report. I think when you read the David Grossman report in full, it's a broader reflection of the debate that the committee had about issues and anticipating issues in terms of both existing coverage, was there something we should be looking at more closely, and other actions that the BBC should be taking. My interpretation, my personal interpretation, was that the BBC engaged with this, the executive team responded, actions were taken. It was going to be an ongoing issue. This is a live, Donald Trump defines the news waves at the moment. It was an important issue to actually think ahead about how do we cover Donald Trump appropriately. So my takeaways were very much focused on that broader representative view. David Grossman's reports were not supposed to be comprehensive. They were quick takes, ad hoc research to help fuel a conversation in the committee, rather than the thematic reviews, which are much bigger picture, longer term, lots of interviews, comprehensive research, and looking at a much broader range of programmes.
Is it? Just to be clear, so the Grossman reports were the only ones that were asked for by the committee on this particular topic? There were no others?
No, on this case, no.
And Michael, just quickly, Dr. Shah said that your memos are, and I'm quoting, a partial description of the evidence that the EGSC received. Is it fair to describe your memo as partial?
My memo is partial. I don't really think so. As I say, it was edited highlights intended to get action. So whether you want to call it partial or not, it was impartial. Well, there was nothing that would mislead the audience in it. I think it was a reasonable edit of all the areas concerned that arose out of the Grossman reports. In that sense, you could, I suppose it'd be fair on the American one, for example, say it's unbalanced, because I didn't mention where David Grossman praised the coverage. I only mentioned where there were problems. But I don't mean to sound arrogant. I don't really apologise for that. I mean, it was 19 pages as it was, for one thing. And if you do read the full Grossman report, I don't know whether you're getting hold of it or not, into the American election coverage, see what you make of it. But my plea, you see, is fine, wherever the BBC earns a gold star, that's great. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't take the problem seriously. So I think the first thing there was they broke their own guidelines on how to use opinion polls. Well, what was done about that afterwards? How did that problem occur? And what's being done about that to prevent an accidental reoccurrence? Answer, we do not know.
And that is Michael Prescott. That's the whistleblower of the BBC. That's the report. Of course, it went to the Telegraph, which then went boom, and it put a whole grenade under this process. And that also was Caroline Daniels, also an external advisor, being questioned there. We're waiting later on this afternoon to hear from the BBC chair, Samir Shah. And on your screens there, that is Michael Prescott. He's the author of that leaked bio, exposing what he thought was bias, editorial bias at the BBC. And he said he wrote that memo because he was troubled by the incipient problems that were getting worse, in his opinion. And he added he had hoped his concerns about Tim Davies' blind spot on editorial failings would have been sorted out quietly. Well, I'm joined by Matthew Stadlen. Matthew, you were watching into Michael Prescott earlier and just now, and I think you were struck, as I was, but this is the guy who supposedly has blown the lid on the BBC, is actually being very apologetic to the BBC.
So much so that you thought briefly that he was Samir Shah himself.
I did.
And by the way, mistakes do happen in the media, and then we move on from them. This is, I think, an extraordinary piece of evidence he's just given. His leaked report, not leaked by him, I'm sure, his leaked report caused weeks of negative headlines for the BBC. It caused accusations, or led to accusations, or contributed to them, of institutional bias at the BBC. It was foundational in a massive row with Donald Trump, the most powerful man in any democracy in the world. And yet we've just heard Michael Prescott in Parliament asked whether he thinks there is institutional bias at the BBC, and his response was, no, I do not.
He was even surprised that heads rolled. When he was asked, do you think that Tim Davie should have quit? He said, yes, I expected Ofcom to have a quiet word and it could have been sorted out quietly and internally, but then it was all over the Telegraph. But isn't that the point, though, Matthew Sadler? For a long time, people have believed, and with some justification looking at this, that the BBC has been marking its own homework in the quiet without getting the full rigour of an Ofcom probe, perhaps the way GB News would, and now the cat's out of the bag.
I would suggest that the BBC is more scrutinised than any media organisation in this country, and rightly so, because it uses our cash. It needs to be held to the highest standards of impartiality and accuracy. Where mistakes are made, it needs to come out and apologise. Clearly, not enough people thought a mistake had been made in that Trump edit. I never thought it was doctored. I never thought it was deliberate. I thought it was a bad piece of editing. I thought it was a mistake. And it's all obviously caused a massive rumpus. But I came out to defend the BBC repeatedly, a lot on this channel, in the days where this scandal was running. And it still may have legs because of Donald Trump's legal action. And the reason I came out to defend it was not because I thought it was perfect, but because I think it is worth defending in an age of misinformation and disinformation.
But this is misinformation and disinformation.
It was misinformation, but that's different from disinformation, and there's an important difference. Misinformation is not deliberate. No, misinformation is not deliberate. When you called this chap Samir Shah, you didn't deliberately call him Samir Shah. You couldn't see the screen.
And so you thought, got to do with them deliberately doctoring Donald Trump's speech to make it look like he was inciting a riot? Ridiculous.
I make it very clear that mistakes, when you're dealing with human beings, and complicated edits can happen, Martin. And where they happen, they should be apologised for. Look, you can think that they did it deliberately.
I do.
They have said very clearly it wasn't malicious.
Most people do, looking at this, apart from those with an affiliation or an empathy with the BBC. Just look at the facts before you.
I've been in many edit suites, as I'm sure you have. And what you try to do in an edit suite is you have to cut down reams of material, in this case a 50-minute speech or something, but you have to do it accurately. And I think I know that they did it inaccurately.
Yeah, they just left the worst bits.
But I don't think that they did it deliberately.
Being told we've got to move on. Thank you very much, Matthew Sadler. And still to come, people are now apparently too fat to be cremated. First is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Well, there's further spells of heavy rain and thunderstorms across western parts of the Balkans and Italy, with snow in the Alps, but plenty of sunshine across the Canary Islands and more so into Portugal and Spain as we go through Tuesday. And like I said, heavy spells of rain and snow across the Alps, but the main focus across Italy and western parts of the Balkans, heavy spells of rain and thunderstorms. Best of the sunshine really confined to Spain as well as we go through the week, highs of up to 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Me and my mum, and look, it looks real, doesn't it?
It isn't. I thought that was real when I first saw it.
Not that you'll be able to see it, but anyway, it's me and mum.
Things like that, AI is amazing, isn't it? Because your mum's no longer with us.
Yes.
You've got a lovely video of you hugging her.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Which is not real, but anyway. It's but I liked it. Like the idea, I thought they've done it very well.
Yeah.
It's quite. But good luck to kids learning to tell the difference between all of that.
Well, we are talking about education today. Lots of you getting in touch. Edmund says, my grandson ended up going to hospital with stress over his exams. GCSEs are too much, I think. They've gotten harder and harder. They're not like they were when I was at school. I only got 3 exams done at 16 and then I dropped out afterwards.
What, you get 3 exams at 16?
That's what Edmund got. He says GCSEs are much harder now.
What we got?
Peter says some of us were self-sufficient at 15 years old. We were growing our own food, we were collecting fuel for our fires, and we had paper jobs, not playing with phones and on social media all the time.
That's a very good point. That's absolutely right. You know, people were fighting in the First World War and the Second World War at 15, 16, 17. And, you know, I mean, pressure. I mean, I just think I think we should teach kids to be more resilient.
Yes.
That's the thing. I think that you just can't say they've buckled and we see that as the latest stage. Some of you may agree with me, but I mean, everybody. I mean, how the heck? I could bore you silly, believe me, bore you silly with pressure and things you did for school and you know, what was expected. There was just no tolerance for any leniency in my school at all. But we got through it, and I can say happiest days of my life still.
Well, maybe resilience needs to be taught in the national curriculum. Maybe it needs to be taught more
Resilience,
at home.
good idea. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:51. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, get this. Funeral directors have warned that coffins are becoming too large to cremate as Britain's obesity crisis grows. Wider caskets, extra pallbearers and bigger furnaces are now being used, with the industry saying that the rising size of the population is creating serious challenges. Well, let's speak now with the former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Steve, I thought I'd have heard it all now, but here we go. People are too fat to fry.
Yeah, and I could sit here this afternoon and give you lots of academic waffle. I could sit here giving you lots of academic studies. I could blame the food manufacturers. I could blame the government. I could sit here and blame everyone else, but I'm not going to. Because what we need to realise is that the one person responsible for our weight is ourselves. And unfortunately, in the UK, we have pandered to the woke brigade. We now say, shout if you're happy and you're fat, clap your hands. It's kind of even cool in some quarters to be really hawky. And I'm afraid that's why now, you know, it's difficult to even cremate someone because they've just allowed themselves to become too fat. And yes, they have allowed themselves to become too fat. I can sit here again and make excuses why they've become too fat, emotional eating and all of this sort of thing. Yes, I know sometimes people have a struggle, but there is always a solution. And in the UK, we don't have that level of conviction anymore. We'd rather go down the victim route and blame everybody else for being a porker, when in fact, actually, my weight is down to me. It's not down to the taxpayer. It's not down to anyone else. It's down to me. So if you're having to pay for an extra, you know, a bigger plot, of which I understand in the cemetery is 400 to 500 quid more, well, tough. You should have, well, you're probably not bothered if you're dead, but the relatives around you might be. And I'm afraid it's your own fault. I mean, that's as it is.
Steve Miller, there's even one funeral director I'm having on the Farrell show later on. He's getting around this by sawing two coffins and bolting them together to make one supersized coffin.
Well, we're like wide loads, aren't we? I mean, we become, as human beings, you know, when you're on the motorway and you see wide load ahead, well, that's what we're becoming as human beings. I mean, it's just happened, Martin, because we live in this politically correct culture. And people on the street know what they should eat. They know what they shouldn't eat if they want to lose weight. It's all about individual motivation. It's mindset and motivation. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get their mindset and motivation in the right place because they don't own it. They don't own their body.
Steve Miller, we have to leave it there. Straight to the point, as ever. Common sense, wonderful to have your company. Thank you, my friend. Always an absolute pleasure. Steve Miller. Now, coming up across Live, back to Westminster as former BBC officials are probed on their editorial standards or lack of. And we'll have that BBC chairman, Samir Shah, on the show. That's next. Don't go anywhere. Can the BBC survive this latest scandal? First, though, here's your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day to come tomorrow. It'll still be on the cold side, if anything a little chillier than today, but the winds will be lighter. There's a pretty brisk and nagging wind blowing around this area of low pressure today. It's been bringing in plenty of showers. They'll continue into the evening, certainly across northeastern England and eastern Scotland. A bit of snow over the tops of the hills, but most of these showers are of rain. Some getting into the west as well, so West Wales, far southwest of England, but many places will be dry. With clear skies over western Scotland and northwest England, that's where we're likely to have a frost. Temperatures dipping a few degrees below freezing in rural spots, but many places staying just a little bit above freezing, in part thanks to that fairly brisk and cold feeling wind. Now that wind will ease as we go through the day on Tuesday, certainly not as strong as today, and there won't be as many showers coming into Aberdeenshire as there have been today. Across western Scotland, we start with that frost. There'll be a few showers, particularly early on across Northern Ireland, but we should also see some sunshine here. Showers grazing the westernmost fringes of Wales, Pembrokeshire, and also Cornwall seeing some showers along with the Isles of Scilly. And again, across eastern counties of England, quite a bit of cloud, certainly to begin with, and a few showers coming in here. But as I said, not as many showers as today, and they should tend to ease, and many areas will be fine and bright. Plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, southern England, and good-looking day for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. The showers in the northeast of Scotland also fade. Temperatures are a degree or so down on today's, but because the winds are lighter and with a bit of sunshine, perhaps it won't feel as cold, but still those numbers below average for the time of year. And look at the blue hue taking hold of the map through Tuesday evening. It's going to turn pretty frosty pretty quickly. So a cold start to Wednesday, and then we see a change through the week with more cloud, outbreaks of rain, but it will turn milder, especially on Thursday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you so much for helping us to reach 8 million followers and subscribers across our social media channels. That's 8 million fearless Brits standing up for what really matters.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the A1 near Torness, traffic is obstructed by a road incident. Consider alternative routes and extra time. On the M4 eastbound between junctions 5 and 4B in Slough, one lane is closed due to a collision. Surrey's A3 southbound at the M25 junction has lane closures. The A38 southbound in Derbyshire between the A50 and A5132 faces delays, adding approximately 15 minutes. And on the trains, Greater Anglia services are disrupted between London Liverpool Street and Brimsdown, while the Stansted Express faces major disruptions. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can enjoy Christmas on us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes and Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK, all the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's blockbuster of a show. Let's cross live now to the White House. Look at this, magnificent pictures where Melania Trump is receiving the 2025 White House Christmas tree. Absolutely beautiful pictures there. The First Lady looking absolutely radiant. Can we try and see the tree? Here we go. We're zooming out. Where is the tree? Beautiful horse and cart. They really know how to do things. Supersized there. No, we'll have the tree in a bit. Anyway, Merry Christmas, Melania. Meanwhile, BBC top brass are facing a grilling in Parliament today. Live pictures on your screens there now. That is Michael Prescott, the whistleblower, and we're expecting to see the BBC chairman, Samir Shah, later in this hour. BBC top brass facing that grilling with huge questions about anti-Trump, anti-Israel bias and pro-trans agendas. Live on your screen there, the Panorama whistleblower, Michael Prescott, is currently being probed while the BBC chairman, Dr. Samir Shah, is up next. Can the BBC survive this latest scandal? We'll be there for you, all up close and live. And with only 48 hours to go now until Rachel Reeves unleashes her budget, taxpayers, businesses, pensioners, farmers and publicans, everybody is bracing themselves for the pain. Who will be the winners and who will be the losers? What will it mean for you? GB News will give you the unparalleled, no-nonsense insights all the way through until D-Day. And the Tory party chairman is facing a blitzkrieg of criticism after he compared a gold reform logo to the Nazi Party's golden party badge. Well, GB News spoke to Kemi Badenoch earlier.
I'm not going to apologise for a tweet that was made in jest. There's far too much time spent on silly things like tweets at a time when we've got a budget on Wednesday.
Look at the state of that on your screen there. After a fashion designer has been accused of ramming woke politics down our throats by releasing a designer clothing range made of wool from, wait for it, gay sheep. Well, on today's show, I'll ask a sheep farmer, can a sheep really be gay, or is this just a bad joke? Forget about LGBTQ, it's LGBTU. Gay sheep putting woolly jumpers out in New York. Meanwhile, we'll have live pictures from Parliament. BBC being cross-examined, probed on their editorial standards or lack of course, after that leak to Gordon Rayner at The Telegraph about the Panorama edit. Michael Prescott, the whistleblower, has been giving evidence, as has Caroline Daniels, another independent expert. But the big ticket, the big show, is the BBC chairman, Dr. Samir Shah. He's expected to face the music in the next hour. We'll be there for you, live and direct. Get in touch usual ways. GBNews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you. Very good evening to you. Just after 5 o'clock, the top story tonight. Rachel Reeves is facing a clear warning ahead of the budget on Wednesday. Big business groups say she must not punish firms with 1,000 small tax hikes and should make tough choices elsewhere instead. They argue that Labour needs to show it's serious about growth, not add more costs as the economy slows. It comes as the budget watchdog has now cut its growth forecast for every year until 2029, blowing a hole in the Chancellor's plans. Rachel Reeves is now weighing up options: higher taxes on the most expensive homes, freezing income tax thresholds for longer, and even a bigger crackdown on benefit fraud, all as she works to fill that multi-billion-pound gap. Sticking with the economy, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch took aim at Labour's employment rights bill today. She says Britain needs more people in work.
My first job was on the high street. I started at McDonald's and then I got a job in New Look, part-time. Those were the places that gave me a chance to learn. Many of you in this room probably had your first job during a summer holiday or on a Christmas shift. These opportunities are at a real risk of disappearing because of this legislation. This is not industrial relations, this is industrial intimidation.
Well, a former BBC advisor at the centre of the Trump panorama controversy has told MPs he does not believe the BBC is institutionally biased, but says there are systemic problems that the corporation has failed to confront. Michael Prescott is giving evidence tonight after his leaked memo accused Panorama of misleading viewers by cutting together Donald Trump's January the 6th speech. That edit sparked already 2 resignations from senior staff and a multi-billion-dollar threat from the US president. Well, Mr Prescott is currently appearing alongside fellow advisor Caroline Daniel before the BBC chair Samir Shah, Robbie Gibb and Caroline Thompson give their own account. Tonight, MPs want clear answers. Why did the BBC take so long to apologise? Were concerns ignored internally? And are deeper editorial failings now starting to come to light? Well, today's session will test whether those questions finally get straight and public explanations. Sir Keir Starmer says there has been real progress, but still hard yards ahead as he prepares to lead fresh talks on a possible peace plan for Ukraine. Downing Street says US-Ukraine negotiations in Geneva marked a major step after weeks of pushback from Europe over proposals that could limit Ukraine's military or force it to give up territory. Sir Keir Starmer says any deal must now deliver a just and a lasting peace, stressing Ukraine must decide its own future. He also confirmed he'll be hosting a virtual meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing tomorrow. But Number 10 admits outstanding issues remain, with US and European leaders still working through concerns as talks are set to continue.
It's got to be just, and obviously matters for Ukraine have to be determined by Ukraine. But it's also got to be lasting. It's got to endure. So that's the focus. There's more work to do. As you know, along with President Macron, I've been leading the Coalition of the Willing, which is a group of countries that have put in place support for Ukraine, particularly capability. And I'm now planning that we will meet virtually tomorrow. So we will host a Coalition of the Willing call to further discuss the progress that is being made and I hope can be made.
Former Prime Minister Lord Cameron has revealed that he's been treated for prostate cancer. David Cameron said he was urged to get a PSA test by his wife Samantha and was then later diagnosed after an MRI scan and biopsy. After being treated successfully, the former Prime Minister says he now wants to use his position to call for screenings to be offered to high-risk men. Princess of Wales has called for the stigma faced by those with addictions to end and for society to show compassion and love to those dependent on drugs or alcohol and gambling. In a message to mark Addiction Awareness Week, the Princess says that society's experience of addiction is shaped by fear and shame and judgment and urged people to have an open conversation, bringing the issue out of the shadows. Princess Catherine is patron of the Forward Trust, a charity supporting recovering addicts that's behind the week-long campaign. And Jimmy Cliff, the Jamaican reggae singer and actor, has died at the age of 81. In a statement today, his wife Latifah Chambers wrote, "It's with profound sadness that I share my husband, Jimmy Cliff, has crossed over due to a seizure followed by pneumonia." A 2-time Grammy-winning artist, Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2010. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with you shortly. Next, though, one last look at tonight's markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
8 minutes past 5, and here are the markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.3104 and €1.1354 euros. The price of gold is £3,112, 12 pence, that's per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 9,547 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now, the author of the leaked memo exposing BBC bias has said that he wrote it because he was troubled by incipient problems that, in his mind, were getting worse. Well, Michael Prescott said the corporation's management were not open to discussing his findings. I think we can just show you some live pictures of that questioning ongoing in Parliament as we speak. In fact, we have some live pictures now. Let's get them up. But, of course, the big-ticket witness, as it were, we're expecting to come in this hour, the BBC chairman, Dr. Samir Shah. This is the evidence now just wrapping up.
No, that's
this is Dr. Samir Shah sitting down now. This is the BBC chairman. This is when the fun really starts. Are we going over to this now? Let's listen in.
Again in front of us at a point where the BBC is said to be in crisis and where the board appears to be in crisis too. Now, you'll probably recall when this committee first met you, we were a little bit frustrated that you seemed unable to take a definitive stance on anything, and we wanted you to give us strong, unequivocal answers. So I want us to make sure that we start off on the right foot today. Did the BBC block the head of news from apologising for the Panorama programme before the 10th of November?
I will directly answer that question, but if you may forgive me, I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to apologise to all the people who believe in the BBC and care for it and wish it to survive and thrive. I'd like to apologise to the licence fee payer who funds the BBC to deliver its mission, and I'd like to apologise to the thousands of people who work for the BBC, our staff, who work with such dedication and commitment to deliver the output we all enjoy so much. I regret the mistakes that have been made and the impact that has had. Let me now come to the question that you asked. Just, if I may ask you, just repeat it for me so I can answer it directly.
Did you block the head, did you and the rest of the BBC board block the head of news from apologising for the Panorama programme on the 10th of November?
We go back to the week in which the story broke in the Telegraph, and you wrote to me, and I was writing the answer to you. I heard that the news wanted to apologise for the splicing of the edit with a white spark. I thought that was a necessary thing to do, but wasn't sufficient, because the fundamental issue here was the sequencing of the edit and the placing of the Proud Boys march. I think the real issue here was the impression left that the President Trump in his 6th of January speech had called to violent action, and what we had to apologise for was that, as well as the splicing of the edit. It's my view that editing interviews is a normal journalistic practice. So that in itself is not what the problem was. The problem was the impression that it led, that it was an impression that President Trump had called for direct violent action, and that wasn't the case, and that is what I thought needed to be apologised for. So the answer to your question is, I didn't think it was adequate. I thought it was necessary but not sufficient.
If you felt that that was the case, then why was there no apology when David Grossman first brought that to your attention?
You mean in the EJSC meetings from January and May? I think that's a very fair question, and I'm looking back, I think we should have made the decision earlier, I think in May, as it happens. In January, you've heard earlier that the report came about, which was about, the context was how well, as we do, constantly review our own coverage, how we did, what went well, what didn't go well, and we examined how we covered the US elections as a general point. And the report came back, as you've said, that the coverage was on the whole excellent, but there were some real issues there. We're invited, and there was at that meeting also coverage of the Arabic service, which we may come back to. I invited, which is normal, for news to give me a formal response to that research. That response came in May. When that response came, one thing I'd like to make clear is that it wasn't This was a constructive discussion that took place at the EGSC. Some very important observations were made in that report, which the executives took on. For me, one of the most interesting ones was the recognition about the story selection idea, and I have a letter in front of me, the news report, you've got it, which said the BBC infrastructure is heavily resourced in the democratic areas, and we need to move into other parts of the US to get a better sense of opinion within it. And that is an action that's going to be taken, and there's going to be movement of which our resources tap into not just the democratic heartlands where we have got, in a way, over too many resources that we need to move it out. I give that example simply to tell you all that this wasn't a discussion where you had a defensive news response to some very serious issues. So that was it. When it came to the panorama edit, there was a difference of opinion across the board. And looking back, I think it would have been better for us to pursue it then. I completely accept that. And as we go into my own understanding of how we got here, it seems to me, along with the editorial and the governance, which are important issues which we'll unpack, I think there is an issue about how quickly we respond, the speed of our response. Why do we not do it quickly enough? Why do we take so much time? And this was another illustration of that. We should have, as a collective, we should have pursued it to the end and got to the bottom of it and not wait, as we did, till it became public discourse. I mean, I have a lot of things to say about my relationship with Mr. Prescott and that report and what he did.
We've got lots of questions to come on to along that line, but what I'm trying to get to, there's been a lot of speculation in the media that it was the inaction and the delay by the BBC board, and it's reported in the press as that there was a dispute in the BBC board that has caused so much of the dramas ever since. I'm just really interested to know why it took so long. Why didn't you get on the front foot? If you'd have got on the front foot and, either with an apology or with a robust defence, either I think, would have been an acceptable way of responding to this, but it's that huge delay. So I mean, why? What was causing the delay? What were your reasons for delaying?
I mean, it seems to me there are two types of timeline. One is one that began with the EGSC report in January.
I'm talking about when the
and then there's a
report.
week after the report was in some way leaked to the public and the Telegraph. Do you mean that particular?
I mean, as soon as the Telegraph started publishing this memo and its coverage of it, there was just a vacuum in the BBC for nearly a week, where there was no comment given about any meaningful way to the substance of it. Why didn't you get on the front foot with either an apology or some kind of defence of what had happened?
But precisely for the question you've just raised, I needed to understand what went wrong and to get the right answer. Getting the right answer was really important.
You knew what went wrong because you'd already had the Grossman report into this and your own...
When we went in that week, I asked the Director General to review, because I said we reflected on it, to review the clip and whether there were any serious editorial breaches. There were, as an outcome of that, and that was the research that had to be done to get it right. It took time to get it right. We knew what the actual apology was for. I said it wasn't just about the splicing, the editing, it was about the impression, and that had to be done properly and investigated thoroughly. As well as that, I was writing a response to you from the board. I have 13 board members, and I needed to make sure that they were aware about what I was writing, and I had their support. I admit, that did take time, and of course it would always be better to be able to get out quickly, but it's as important for me to get it right and to get it supported by the board.
If the BBC had responded quicker, do you think that the resignations might not have happened?
That's a hypothetical I can't answer. All I will say is that I think the resignation of the CEO of News was a very honourable act. I think it was right of her to take responsibility for an error in her division. As she herself said, the buck stops with me. And I said, in public life, it's rare to find people who accept that something went wrong in their own division and accept responsibility and take responsibility, and I applaud her for that.
Your culture and media editor, Katie Razzle, reported that Deborah Turnus became more and more angry and frustrated as the week went on because she was prevented by the board from putting out that apology. Was that in some way to blame for the fact that she then resigned from her post?
You would have to ask her. I've already repeated, I thought the apology that was on the table was necessary but not sufficient.
Did you try and stop her from resigning?
I spoke to Director General about it. The resignation or otherwise of the head of news is a matter for the Director General, not for the board or for the chair. My job is to test and challenge the Director General. It's an operational editorial matter, who he hires and who he doesn't hire underneath him.
Then the Director General resigned as well. Did you try and stop him from resigning?
I did indeed, and I spent a great deal of time. I do not think the Director General should have resigned. I think that the act by the Director of News was an honourable and proper act. I think she took responsibility, for which I will again say I applaud her for doing so. I do not think that meant that the Director General had also had to resign. However, when you read the Director General's reason for resigning, certainly this was one factor, but he also says there were many other factors that led to that. I wish, and can I say the board wishes, that the Director General had not resigned. He had our full confidence throughout.
Sure.
Yes, Cam.
An organisation as large as the BBC, I would imagine it should have occurred to you that you could have put out an initial statement while you were still trying to get to grips with the gravity of what had happened prior to a full apology. Did you receive pressure from anybody else on that board to delay such an apology?
Absolutely not. What I would say, we did put out a full statement, which was, I think looking back, rather vanilla in its statement, as corporate BBC tends to do. And we did do it to hold, because I needed to put out a fuller statement, but I needed to be sure and I was right about what I was saying. This was a very, very important error, and I needed to make sure that what I was apologising for was fully sourced and fully right. It needed to be right, and it took its time.
The resignation of the Director General is quite a big deal, is it not? When you tried to dissuade Tim Davie from his resignation, how did that conversation go?
I don't think it is right for me to discuss private conversations with me and the Director General.
Well, it might be if the BBC is at stake.
Well, I think confidential statements, conversations need to remain confidential. But let me answer your question. I know Tim, and I've got to know Tim very well over the last 18 months. He's an outstanding Director General. He is extraordinarily good. His energy, his dedication, his commitment to the BBC cannot be gainsaid.
But his commitment was broken.
What? Well, as you know in his statement, he felt responsible as editor-in-chief for the error. My view was the responsibility was taken by the Chief of News, and that was proportionate.
Thanks, Chair.
Can I just quickly take you back to the response to the committee's letter November the 4th? You apologised on behalf of the BBC for the way that the Trump speech on the 6th of January were edited. Your words were, the BBC does accept the way that the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. The BBC would like to apologise for that error of judgment. Dr. Shah, I've had a look at the BBC editorial guidelines, section 3.4.25 of the BBC's editorial policy. That says, for news, factual and some factual entertainment content, unless clearly signalled to the audience or other reconstructions, content makers should not normally intercut shots and sequences if the resulting juxtaposition of material leads to a materially misleading impression of events. It seems quite clear to me that the way that both the Newsnight and Panorama edited this clip broke those BBC editorial guidelines. So what I'm just trying to get to grips with is why it took a year to apologise for this failing, despite the EGSC, which you chair, having concerns about this programme on 3 separate occasions, and why no action was taken despite the fact that there was a clear evidence of a breach of editorial guidelines.
As I said, in the January meeting, that report came out. I then invited the news division to give me a formal response to it. That response took place in May, and we discussed it then, and there was a different set of opinions around it. There was a plausible case that this edit, because the point of the programme was to deliver to the British audience, because it was about the supporters for President Trump and what they were learning. So there was a case for, as it were, the edit. This was discussed and debated, and there was a difference of opinion. I've already said we should have pursued it further at that time. And by pursuing it further, we should have investigated it in detail with the people responsible in the BBC to do that. You must remember, that is an operational matter and not a matter for, in governance terms, for the non-execs. But it is a matter which we could have pursued harder, is what I would say, and we should have done. Had we done so, then what you've just read out would have come out, and there would have been a formal response that this did breach that, and we would have then taken on.
What was the tipping point that prompted your apology? Was it the 500 letters of complaint to the BBC? Was it the resignation of the Director General? Was it the memo?
No, straight away.
Wait a second. Yes. Or was it the threat of legal action from the President of the United States?
I'm sorry, say that again. The last one?
The threat of legal action from the President of the United States. What was the sort of tipping point in suddenly deciding that apology was forthcoming? The memo, the Director General going, the letters of complaint, or the threat of legal action from the President?
As I wrote to you, when the memo entered public discourse, there were a lot of complaints about it. And we decided at that moment to reflect and review the decision. And that's when we came out with the outcome that, yes, it was a mistake. It was an error of judgment, and that's what I wrote to you, and then later on.
Just to be clear, had this not have been covered by the memo and prompted all these letters of complaint, that would probably have it would never have come back. It would never have risen back to the surface.
It's worth noting that in when we discussed it, there had been no complaints to the BBC News about this. So there was no. If that had happened, we could have looked at it. As I said again, there was a discussion at the board about this. There was a debate, and because there'd been no formal complaints, we let it rest. As you probably all know, very soon after that, I was uncomfortable with that outcome and that result. And I initiated, it wasn't the only reason, I had a number of things over the time I've been chair, which I worried about the workings of this committee, whether it was properly defined, whether the relationship with the board, with the main board was precise enough, with the terms of reference with the advisors, whether the composition was good. And I invited Chris Saul in June to look again. And long before this broke, I did think there were things to be done, and that process was underway. One of those things, and maybe Caroline will talk about it, one of those things was, what is the mechanic when at a board, at the committee, there is disagreement within it? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that in such a way that we don't cross that line between governance and editorial? It's an important line we hold, but it does seem to me that this is thrown up there. As I said, one of the issues I have to face is, what were the governance failures here? What were the process failures? And one of them is that. And I think we do need to find a way, and Caroline is going to be looking into that. I'd started it with Chris Saul. Chris Saul had some interim findings. We were underway. I should say, as you know, I listened intently to your conversation with Mr. Prescott. I met him several times during that period. I invited him to talk to Chris Saul, and they met to discuss it. After the letter went out, I talked to him again. After we met the board, I talked to him, and I said, I would like you to be engaged in fixing what's wrong with the EGSC, how we can get it to a state where you would not have cause to write such a letter again. I did that. He seemed to rise to it. So perfect. So we were going to carry on. Don't think this committee should think I ignored Mr. Prescott. I did not. I think he raised some important questions we need to answer. I've already said I don't think it was a rounded picture of what actually happened in the EGSC, and I think you've heard from your other witness that in fact the executive took many actions, detailed actions. So it wasn't just a case of a report coming out and a defensive reaction. That just is not an accurate account of what happened.
It was reported in the press quite a lot that the reason for the delay in the board responding to our letter and indeed sort of opining in any way on what had happened was because there was a big difference of opinion at board level. Is that true?
In May? Do you mean?
No, we're talking about recently in response to all the news that came out. You lost, two very key, very senior members of the BBC team, and then still we waited for you to say anything.
At the board meeting in October, when we discussed the memo, we discussed it at length, and there was a certain repeating of what happened in the EGSC, but it was important we discussed it, and there was some differences of opinion. But we did agree on the next step at that meeting, and the next step was for me to go back to Mr. Prescott, discuss his email to the board, and invite him to be part of reviewing how the EGSC could work better, to which he agreed. And then, as we know, a few days later, it was all over the papers.
Memo hit the papers, but that's not what I asked you. What I asked you is, there was this big delay between the newspapers covering this story and the board coming out with either a statement or a response to the letter that we wrote. And it's been reported in the press that the reason for that delay was because there was a big dispute within the board about how to respond. There was, in some cases, people said chaos in the board. How true is that?
There was neither chaos nor that. The delay was, you wrote to me on the Tuesday, I replied to you on the Monday. That was the deadline you gave me. During that time, I wanted to investigate it, what went wrong, and get it right, and I needed to make sure the board were with me. And we discussed this. I don't think there was any chaos or difficulty there.
But I think, yes, if I could just add, because I was obviously part of some of those discussions, there was a continuing and sharp difference of opinion between certainly the chairman and me and some others on the board with the director of news about whether we were going to apologise just for the edit or whether the impact of the edit and indeed the positioning of the Proud Boys material had given a misleading impression. We felt that it had. And the news continued to maintain that actually the impression given, despite the edit, was correct because the gist of the speech by Trump had, for example, the use of the word fight 15 times and only talked about peace once. And they felt that the edit was justified, but it should have been a more transparent edit. We felt that the edit had led to a more profound problem. And indeed, your quotation of the editorial guidelines is absolutely right. We felt it violated them.
Thank you. Natasha?
Thanks so much for coming in today. So just to Sir Robbie, kind of what is your view, what in your view took the board so long to publish a response?
I mean, there was definitely a difference of opinion, and it was properly outlined by Samir and Caroline. It all came down to whether, from my perspective, the point I was making, that it was a serious error, and simply having an identifiable edit and apologising for that would not be enough, because what mattered was what the meaning was. So on the one hand, you could argue that if you had a white flash that showed where the edit was, then that would be fine, and you apologise for not having the white flash. My view, and I think the editorial policy view, independent, is that if the meaning of the new constructed white flash edit, followed by the Proud Boys, gave the impression that it was a call to arms, it was a breach of editorial policy. That was my view. The discussions around that delayed the actual reply to this committee's letter, I was not involved in, but I was involved in the debate in the board, and this was the point I was making.
Just sort of in response to the memo in general, so there wasn't much kind of said publicly in response to it. What kind of how did we get to the point where we weren't really kind of responding to the points that were raised publicly for quite a long time?
I mean, the response to the Michael Prescott's memo to the board in total.
Yes. Publicly, we didn't hear anything about it until the leak. So, why was there such a delay in kind of like a robust response to it?
Well, I suppose you would say the delay begins the moment it's leaked publicly. Let me make that separate from the response to the memo itself. When the memo came, and I spoke to Mr. Prescott about it, it went to the board. Accompanying that memo was what a separate note which provided, in my view, a more rounded picture of all, which you heard in your early session, all the different issues that the EGSC have examined, and also, may I say, the actions taken, including on some of the actions that Mr. Prescott appears to think no actions were taken, and that's simply not the case. We did take actions. Actions were you discussed at length the car insurance story. I find it interesting that was one that Mr. Press picked up. We didn't need the complaint. We ourselves, or the executives, may I say, discovered it, thought it was wrong, took it down within 6 days, and it featured as, I think, one of in the annual report as a serious editorial breach. I don't think you can actually argue the case that the executive did not do anything. I mean, that is just simply an unfair account of it. I think on many of the areas that he spoke in this letter, which, as you've all heard, was a partial account of what was actually done, all the various really important discussions we had in our thematic reviews about economy, about tax and spend, and about immigration and migration. Again, it's not the case that nobody in the BBC knows about this. Andrew Dilnott, who wrote the text, spent a long time after the report going around the newsroom explaining it. Madeline Sumption did so. We are committed to learning the lessons. I mean, I was partly involved at the beginning on the migration one, so I know a bit about it. I know all the people I spoke to. And like all these reports, there are things that the BBC journalists do well, and there are things they can improve on. There were a number of recommendations. So I just think you mustn't get away with thinking that the EGSC is not a functioning committee that does take on board issues, dig deep into things, talks about more urgent matters, and the executive, on the whole, respond positively and constructively to it.
Dr. Shah, I just want to come back to the memo and the kind of leaking. Yes. So, Robbie, were you aware that it was going to leak?
Absolutely not, of course not.
So when you worked on the Sorota report, has the term that came out of that consistently was the culture of defensiveness in the BBC. Do you think that's changed since then?
I do think it's changed. I know that Tim Davey, the outgoing Director General, is very passionate about that, and in relation to the press office, that there had been, I think, a computer says no default position and circling the wagons. I genuinely don't think that is the case anymore. I mean, of course, people are always naturally defensive when you're being criticised, but I think there has been a cultural change. Just want to say about the Prescott report more generally. I think there was a lot in the report that I think a lot of people at the BBC management agree with. It was basically copied in large part from the David Grossman report, but it was a snapshot in time, and this is crucial to your point. It is not that it was particularly unrepresented of the Grossman reports from the time, but a lot has happened since then, and we've had all the action plan which we can go through with you. And on the car insurance is a very good example. He feels very passionate about it. I know about this particular. So it took quite a while between his original email and when it was eventually properly discussed at EGSC. But once the committee had the full facts in front of it, as Samir was saying, it took only 6 days to deal with it.
Caroline, do you have anything to say around the kind of defensiveness within the BBC?
I think there's always a natural tendency to want to perhaps not be defensive but support your staff, particularly in journalism where of course there's a lot of people taking risks and really working under a lot of pressure. So I think amongst management, having been once a news manager myself, there's a natural tendency to think, hold on a minute, I need to sort of protect them. But actually, the thing that strikes me, and I bet you may know, I've recently come back to the BBC as a non-exec, having been an executive before, but having had a 15-year gap, is the extraordinary seriousness with which the BBC continually.
That's BBC top brass there receiving a light flambeing in Parliament. The key giver of evidence there was Dr. Samir Shah, of course, the chairman of the BBC. He opened an extraordinary session by saying, "I'd like to apologise to the BBC licence payers, to BBC staff and all of those wishing to protect the BBC." He furthered, "I regret the mistakes that have been made and the impact that we had." He was then asked, did he think it was necessary for Sir Tim Davie, the Director General, to resign? He said, "I did indeed try to stop the Director General from resigning. I wish that the Director General had not resigned. He had our full confidence." Backing the man who bit the bullet and apologising fulsomely to licence payers, to everybody out there. Chris Hope, our political editor, is with me in the studio. Chris, we also heard some evidence there on your screens. That's Sir Robbie Gibb. Of course, he is the non-executive director. A lot of people pointing their finger at him as some kind of Conservative Party stooge. Of course, a former Theresa May director of comms at Number 10. But Chris, you were pulling out some detail there. One of the huge problems from the very beginning has been this edit and the sequencing of the edit, and that was addressed in this session.
That's right. It's not just about the panorama speech that Donald Trump gave on the Panorama show on January the 6th. Of course, they spliced together, I think, the 14th minute and the 56th minute without doing a flash of light to indicate that it had been made. But I think what was interesting was the chairman of the BBC saying as bad was the fact that these Proud Boys, these supporters of Donald Trump, were marching in real time towards the speech to hear what Trump said. But the Panorama suggested they marched towards the Capitol in response to what Trump said, and that was as bad. And that line there from Samir Shah, he said that an apology was necessary but not sufficient, described then the resignation by Deborah Tenness, the CEO of BBC News, as honourable, but wasn't required that Tim Davie resigned. And in fact, confirming there what we had seen reported elsewhere, the BBC did try and keep the Director General, Tim Davie.
And Dr. Samir Shah there, just to clarify that point, he said the impression of the edit was that it implied Mr. Trump incited violence, which he did not. Now, Chris Hope, politically, this has kind of fizzled out a bit. We're expecting there to be a dramatic telephone call between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. Get the BBC in order, whip your boys into shape. Nothing has really come of that. But do you think that the White House comms team will be watching this closely? Because I think there was a lot in what Dr. Samir Shah was saying there to try and diffuse the legal case from the White House.
Well, I would say two things. It's interesting that in the phone calls between Donald Trump and our Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the weekend, of course, Ukraine is far, far more important than this, but the issue of the BBC never came up. Now, a week ago, just over a week ago on Air Force One, Donald Trump did say he was going to speak to Keir Starmer, who was expected to step in and say, please don't sue the BBC because it's funded by you and me and by all the licence fee payers in this country. That hasn't happened. That suggests to me that Trump's got other things to worry about. But of course, his lawyers will be watching the disclosures right now. We're watching Robbie Gibb on screen there, who is a former head of the politics unit at the BBC, ran all the reporting and then went into politics for Theresa May, so was a Tory, maybe not so now, but was then. They'll be watching this and wondering, well, what is being said here? Will that support this legal action? Don't forget, we could be on the hook as licence fee payers for $5 billion. That's the target which Donald Trump wants to sue for. So, but I'm watching also who's giving the questions there. Just now we had Natasha Irons, she's a Labour MP. Before that, we had Cameron Thomas, a Lib Dem MP. Just flashing up on screen there is Dame Caroline Dinenage, a Tory MP. This matters because this story about the BBC is so political. The Lib Dems are piling in to bash Trump, support the BBC, as are largely Labour. The Tories, of course, on the other side, they are critics of the BBC.
I have to say, I thought Dame Caroline Dinenage was the most impressive of those cross-examiners. She specifically pointed out a specific part of the BBC editorial charter which specifically prohibits those kind of non-sequential edits unless there's a flash put in the edit. Now, a white flash is the visual representation that this is a clip that's not in direct sequence. It's a clear cue to the audience that things have been taken out of context and spliced together. That was wholly and provably missing from both of these edits, and she pointed that out clearly, and Dr. Samir Shah said, yes, I accept that.
And in written journalism, there'd be a diaresis. It'd be 3 dots to indicate. Speaking a bit later, they said this. Yes, ellipsis. Is it not? Yeah, ellipsis. Forgive me. But you know what I mean? No, that it'd be indicative to viewers.
Yes, that's the tool. The clear signage that you give. This is a ... means it didn't happen in sequence. And in video editing, you get that white flash out, which is the way ordinarily edits of this nature would be done, but Dame Caroline Dinenage there pointing out, and this is really important because particularly, as you said, with the Proud Boys marching down towards Capitol Hill in the BBC edit in direct response to Donald Trump's incitement to fight like hell, that didn't happen.
Yeah. We're looking now at some more evidence we heard from Samir Shah. He said there was a plausible case for the splicing of the speech, but what they need to do was show it was clearly being spliced, and that never happened. Yeah, fascinating here. What we're yet to hear, did Samir Shah offer to resign as well? Because reporting over the weekend, after another member of the board, BBC board, left last week, is he on the hook now to go as well?
The key point here, he started this session by saying, I'd like to apologise to BBC licence fee payers. I'd like to apologise to those who support the BBC. I'd like to apologise to all of the staff. I regret the mistakes that have been made and the impact that has had. So the most complete attempt, I would say, at a mea culpa here, Dr. Samir Shah didn't quite say sorry.
No.
But he did say, I would like to apologise. And this is the biggest revelation yet, Chris Hope, that the chairman is taking this on the chin.
He is indeed. That's Rupert Huck there, Labour MP, questioning the panel there. Yeah, he apologised for those who believe in the BBC, the licence fee payers, you and me and the viewers who pay for this organisation, and the thousands of workers who work there. It's a total cock-up. This apology should have come in May last year. It was raised twice at board level, January and May, and by May it had to be addressed. We heard earlier from Michael Prescott, who wrote the document, a former Sunday Times political editor. He said that within 5 days of him sending a copy of his report to Ofcom, I think he said, and the DCMS, it was leaked to the Telegraph.
OK, thank you very much, Chris. So that probing, that cross-examination continuing in Parliament. Anything dramatic happens, we'll cut back to it throughout the rest of the show. Chris Hope, you've been superb today, as ever. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now stick with us, we've got another fantastic story. Can sheep be gay? Yep, that's next.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
First of all, are you coffee or tea?
Both. Both.
OK.
Both, yeah.
If you're having tea, is it herbal tea or is it normal tea? I say normal tea.
Real tea.
Real tea. And is it milk or no milk?
Obviously milk.
Obviously milk. Final question before I read the piece.
Yeah.
Milk in first or last?
Second.
Yeah, second.
Afterwards, if you've got a bag, but obviously if you're brewing it yourself, then you want to actually just check that it's brewed
I'm
properly.
from Wrexham. We just put the milk in, tea bag in the mug.
What?
Pour it in, and that's it. What's wrong with that?
And at this point, we stop talking.
It doesn't brew properly.
No.
Well, look, why doesn't it brew properly?
Because it's cold.
You know exactly the right colour to bring it out, and you put it's a builder's tea.
What Dad says.
Well, anyway, the average tea drinker has 62,000 cuppers in a lifetime, costing £6,222. I'd argue that isn't correct, because it's £4 for just a cappuccino, isn't it? Certainly in London now, at least £4. Most of the money is spent on milk, averaging 6p a cup again. Tea bags cost around 4p each, and electricity to boil the kettle comes to 2p per day. And one of the top tips is only put the amount of hot water that you need to boil in, because that saves you money on your electricity.
62,000 cups in a lifetime. They've not met my mother.
Well, she's 162.
Honestly, it's every opportunity. It's
Is it? I think that's nice.
Exactly.
If I'm left to my own devices, I'd have a good 3 cups a day.
Yeah.
Oh,
Of tea.
per hour?
In the morning, I'd have maybe 5 cups of coffee.
Do you get jittery?
Yes.
Do you? See, I know. I'm
What
at
about
the
you?
point. No, never. I'm trying to do my 1 meal a day OMAD.
Yeah.
So I have coffees all the time, you know, and I don't get jittery. I don't think.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's economy is at a crossroads.
And this budget day, every decision counts.
From taxes and rent to the cost of living.
Whatever the outcome, the GB News family will be there.
With expert analysis breaking down what it means for you.
Budget day, all day Wednesday.
Only here on the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Okay, let's go back now to that live session in Parliament. The BBC top brass taking questions. Dr. Samir Shah, the chairman of the BBC, being currently
ran this programme called This Week with Andrew Neil
in Parliament there by Dame Caroline Dinenage and a bunch of other parliamentarians. Chris Hope is still with us. The top line today, Chris, will be Dr. Samir Shah on your screen there, the chairman of the BBC. I'd like to apologise to the BBC licence fee payers, to the people who protect and believe in the BBC, and to all the BBC staff. I regret the mistakes that have been made and the impact that has had. The closest, Chris, we've come yet to BBC taking responsibility for their clear breach of their own editorial
And that's an
direction.
apology which the chairman wished had been given in May last year. We've heard from him already. It was necessary but not sufficient, they said, that apology. That's why he felt it's honourable that Deborah Turness, the CEO, resigned of BBC News, but it wasn't necessary for Tim Davie, the Director General, to resign. And in fact, it was very clear there that the chairman tried to keep him. Just now, we've been hearing from Robbie Gibb, who sits to the left as you look at Samir Shah on screen now. He has said he's been dismissed in the past as an active member of the Tory party, according to Emily Maitlis, a former Newsnight presenter, now a podcaster. He has said this: the perception of him had been weaponised. He said he's impartial. It's not how he's perceived. He is hugely impartial. He has friends across the divide, and it's important to say that.
OK, let's get to my next guest now. It's the former BBC head of religion and ethics, and that is Akhil Ahmed. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ahmed. Did enough come out of that today for you that the BBC has taken responsibilities for its clear breaches of its own editorial standards?
No, it has, hasn't it? I mean, because basically, Samir has apologised. I mean, and I think a very, very strong apology as well. You must remember as well, there are a lot of the staff at the BBC who were doing a job day in, day out, doing things correctly, doing things in the right kind of way. They need to see that actual action has been taken. They need to see that their reputation is not going to be maligned in this way as well. So I completely think that he's done the right thing. We could have a conversation about whether or not, him trying to convince Tim Davie to stay or not was the right thing to do. But in terms of issuing an apology on behalf of the staff, and also to the staff, I think that's an important thing, because we understand the apology to President Trump. We understand the apology to the licence fee payer. We understand the apology to the viewers, to the listeners, to everybody. That makes sense. But also an apology to the staff. I think that's quite an important thing for me, because thousands of people do their job day in, day out, and they have been maligned by this as well.
Do you think that there are 5 billion reasons that Donald Trump will say, OK, this is enough, I'll take this as an apology, and the lawsuit will be dropped? Do you think that could happen next?
Well, who knows what President Trump thinks, quite frankly, from 1 minute to another. You'd be a very, very foolish person to second guess. But my gut feeling is that this isn't going to become a big lawsuit. You must remember, if you look at the history of some of the suits he's had in America, not absolutely everybody has buckled. Not every single broadcaster and publisher that he's threatened to court.
Akhil Ahmed, we have to leave it there. Run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Short but sweet. Up next is Jubes and Co. 6 till 7. I'll be back at 7 till 8. Don't go anywhere. Huge amount of excitement lies ahead on GB News.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day to come tomorrow. It'll still be on the cold side, if anything a little chillier than today, but the winds will be lighter. There's a pretty brisk and nagging wind blowing around this area of low pressure today. It's been bringing in plenty of showers. They'll continue into the evening, certainly across northeastern England and eastern Scotland. A bit of snow over the tops of the hills, but most of these showers are of rain. Some getting into the west as well, so West Wales, far southwest of England, but many places will be dry. With clear skies over western Scotland and northwest England, that's where we're likely to have a frost. Temperatures dipping a few degrees below freezing in rural spots, but many places staying just a little bit above freezing, in part thanks to that fairly brisk and cold feeling wind. Now that wind will ease as we go through the day on Tuesday, certainly not as strong as today, and there won't be as many showers coming into Aberdeenshire as there have been today. Across western Scotland, we start with that frost. There'll be a few showers, particularly early on across Northern Ireland, but we should also see some sunshine here. Showers grazing the westernmost fringes of Wales, Pembrokeshire, and also Cornwall, seeing some showers along with the Isles of Scilly. And again, across eastern counties of England, quite a bit of cloud, certainly to begin with, and a few showers coming in here. But as I said, not as many showers as today, and they should tend to ease, and many areas will be fine and bright. Plenty of sunshine over the Midlands, southern England, and good-looking day for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland too. The showers in the northeast of Scotland also fade. Temperatures are a degree or so down on today's, but because the winds are lighter and with a bit of sunshine, perhaps it won't feel as cold, but still those numbers below average for the time of year. And look at the blue hue taking hold of the map through Tuesday evening. It's going to turn pretty frosty pretty quickly. So a cold start to Wednesday, and then we see a change through the week with more cloud, outbreaks of rain, but it will turn milder, especially on Thursday.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for making us the fastest growing news website in the UK. We're truly humbled, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Roads across the UK are experiencing various congestion levels. In Rochdale, the M62 westbound between junctions 18 and 19 has a 15-minute delay. In Warwickshire, the A5 southbound between the A51 and the junction with the M42 faces a significant hour-long delay. In Slough, the M4 eastbound between junctions 5 and 4B has one lane closed. Anti-clockwise on the M25, congestion between junctions 3 and 1A causes a 40-minute delay. And on the trains, London Overground faces disruptions on the Suffragette line and between Watford Junction and London Euston. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can enjoy Christmas on us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray,
are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question, that's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name is Patrick Christie's. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GB News, and that's what sets us apart.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes and Co coming up tonight.
The rider is getting heavier than the horse.
Well, that was Kemi Badenoch today, warning about the growing size of our welfare state. Let me tell you, it's set to grow again by perhaps another £15 billion in the budget. Surely it is now obvious that this is unsustainable, no? Meanwhile, though, the head of the CBI warns the government to change course, and the business secretary admits that Labour policy has led to entrepreneurs leaving the country. Brilliant. And medical trials set to begin on children as young as 10 years old. I'm talking about puberty blockers. What do you think to that? Also today, the chairman of the BBC has said sorry to us licence payers. Do you accept that, or is it a little bit too little, too late? I've got all of that and lots more, including today's most ridiculous comparison of who is Nazis. I'm going to start some kind of league chart, I think. It's getting absolutely absurd. Keeping me company, my panel tonight. I've got the head of Policy for Reform UK, Zia Youssef, and new face to the panel, Labour MP Samantha Niblett. But before we get stuck in here, your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Rachel Reeves is facing a clear warning ahead of the budget on Wednesday. Big business groups say she must not punish firms with 1,000 small tax hikes, excuse me, and should make tough choices elsewhere instead. They argue that Labour needs to show it's serious about growth, not add more costs as the economy slows. It comes as the budget watchdog has cut its growth forecast now for every year until 2029, blowing a hole in the Chancellor's plans. Rachel Reeves is now weighing up options, including higher taxes on the most expensive homes, freezing income tax thresholds for longer, and a bigger crackdown on benefit fraud, all as she works to fill that multi-billion-pound gap. With the economy, Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch took aim at Labour's Employment Rights Bill today, saying Britain needs more people in work.
My first job was on the high street. I started at McDonald's, and then I got a job in New Look, part-time. Those were the places that gave me a chance to learn. Many of you in this room probably had your first job during a summer holiday or on a Christmas shift. These opportunities are at a real risk of disappearing because of this legislation. This is not industrial relations, this is industrial intimidation.
Also tonight, senior BBC figures are being questioned by MPs as the fallout from the Trump Panorama edit continues to widen. The committee has already heard from Michael Prescott, the former advisor whose leaked memo accused Panorama of misleading viewers with its edit of Donald Trump's January the 6th speech. It's already sparked 2 senior resignations and a multi-billion-dollar legal threat from the US president. Well, now it's the turn of the BBC board, including Chair Samir Shah, who says he regrets the edit and has admitted the corporation was too slow to act. Mr Shah told MPs earlier the BBC should have made the decision earlier to apologise and that delays weren't due to board pressure, but to making sure any apology, he says, was fully sourced and correct.
Nothing on BBC Northern Ireland.
Sir Keir Starmer says there's real progress, but still hard yards ahead as he prepares to lead fresh talks on a possible peace plan for Ukraine. Downing Street says US-Ukraine negotiations in Geneva marked a major step after weeks of pushback over proposals that could limit Ukraine's military or even force it to give up territory. Sir Keir Starmer says any deal must now deliver a just and a lasting peace, stressing Ukraine must decide its own future. He also confirmed he'll host a virtual meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing tomorrow.
To be just, and obviously matters for Ukraine have to be determined by Ukraine, but it's also got to be lasting. It's got to endure. So that's the focus. There's more work to do. As you know, along with President Macron, I've been leading the Coalition of the Willing, which is a group of countries that have put in place support for Ukraine, particularly capability. And I'm now planning that we will meet virtually tomorrow. So we will host a Coalition of the Willing call to further discuss the progress that is being made and I hope can be made.
And former Prime Minister Lord Cameron has revealed that he's been treated for prostate cancer. Mr Cameron said he was urged to get a PSA test by his wife Samantha and was later diagnosed after an MRI scan and biopsy. After being successfully treated, the former Prime Minister says he now wants to use his position to call for the screening offered to high-risk men. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at 7. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Thank you very much for that. Hello, good evening to each and every one of you. My name is Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes and Co. I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. I was off last week. I was a bit under the weather. I missed you, and it is good to be back. So thanks for your company. Alongside me, I've got the Head of Policy for Reform UK, Zia Youssef. Alongside him, I've got a new face. We like those. Labour MP Samantha Nibbler. You're very welcome tonight. As, of course, each and every single one of you at home, join the conversation in all the usual ways. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can tweet or you can X me. Very serious topic there at the end of those headlines. We spoke about prostate cancer often on this programme. Cannot stress it enough, men. You don't need me lecturing you about your bits and pieces, but really, it is so important that you all do take some time to get yourself checked. There'll be some women nudging their fellas on the sofa there going, see, she's talking about you. Just do it. There's no point dying of shame, is there, or anything like that? That's my advice to you. Anyway, look, lecture over. Let's talk about the BBC, shall we? Because we've discussed this at length on this programme. I know it's a topic that really excites a lot of interest from you guys, not least because many of you, of course, are forced to pay over the licence fee. Well, let's cross over to the chairman of the BBC. This is what he had to say earlier on today. A message to you, licence payers.
I regret the mistakes that have been made and the impact that has had. I'd like to apologise to the licence fee payer who funds the BBC to deliver its mission, and I'd like to apologise to the thousands of people who work for the BBC, our staff.
Well, there you go. He's very sorry indeed, but is it too little, too late? I want you to join the conversation and tell me your thoughts. But before I get into that, political editor Christopher Hope joins me. Christopher, good evening to you. For anyone that just missed that session, bring us up to speed.
Well, it's ongoing, isn't it, Michelle? Earlier we heard from Michael Prescott, who wrote that memo, of course, which eventually brought down both the Director General, Tim Davey, and also the Deborah Tenness, who's the CEO of the News Division. We heard there, didn't we, a clear apology from the chairman of the BBC, Samir Shah. He apologised to the following people, didn't he? Those who believe in the BBC, the licence fee payers, and the thousands of staff who work there. He said that he recognised there should have been an apology made more quickly, more swiftly when the Prescott dossier dossier landed with the board. It landed first. It was given to them in January, then May, or at least rather the issue of the Panorama issue was discussed then. He says the apology should have come in May last year. He said also that the apology when it came was necessary but not sufficient, and that was because there were two elements to that dossier which he was alarmed by. Firstly, the splicing together of what Donald Trump said over a 50-minute period in that January the 6th speech. But secondly, and as importantly, and I think overlooked by many of the people talking about this issue, is the editing of a march by Trump supporters called Proud Boys, who are marching, in fact, to hear what Donald Trump said, but the edit on Panorama looked like they were marching after hearing what he'd said. And of course, what the Panorama thing said, or suggested he had said, that they should go and take on the Capitol, and that was wrong. And I think he said that was right, that it was addressed. Now, he's now been defending in the last few moments Sir Robbie Gibb. Sir Robbie Gibb, of course, a chairman on the board of the BBC. He's been accused of being an active agent or a member of the Tory, an active member of the Tory party by Emily Maitlis, a former Newsnight presenter and now a podcast and critic of the BBC and or the way this story has been treated. He's been we've heard very clearly from Mr. Shah that he was independent and he was head of the political department at the BBC, and he never played politics at the BBC. So this is a kind of washing of the kind of dirty laundry of the corporation in real time, live on GBNews and elsewhere. I should say just finally, over the weekend we've had a couple of phone calls from Donald Trump, the US President, to Keir Starmer. Now, if you rewind back a week, we were told that Sir Keir Starmer was likely to have a conversation with Donald Trump about the BBC, stepping in to say, don't sue it for $5 billion as you're threatening. Well, it wasn't raised, we're told, by sources in the government. Donald Trump has not raised the BBC since he first talked about it in that interview with Bev Turner 10 days ago on GB News. That suggests to me that, of course, other things happening in the world, far more important things, dealing with the end of the Ukraine war, hopefully with a peace deal. But maybe the tension, maybe the heat of this battle and Trump's possibility of suing the corporation for $5 billion, maybe that likelihood is fading away slowly.
Stuff, Christopher Herb, thank you very much for that update. Adrian, one of my viewers, says, Michelle, personally, I think it's time the BBC chairman retires. Chris and Colin, actually, you both make the interesting same point. You're saying it's not a mistake, Michelle. It was done deliberately. I always found that choice of word, it was a mistake, we're sorry for the mistakes made. Yeah, I'm with Chris and Colin, I'm afraid. Maggie says, sorry is an empty word. Michelle, I believe that this will happen. It's always been happening and it will happen again, says Maggie.